You wake before the sun has climbed above the mountains, though it is difficult to tell exactly when night has ended. The world beyond the doorway is painted in shades of deep blue and silver, and only the faintest glow touches the eastern horizon. Around you, the longhouse is already stirring. Somewhere in the darkness, a log settles in the hearth with a soft crack, sending a shower of glowing embers upward before they disappear into the smoke that curls toward the roof. The familiar scent of burning pine mingles with damp wool, drying herbs, and the earthy smell of animals sheltered nearby. It is a fragrance that has seeped into every wooden beam, every woven blanket, and every piece of clothing you own. Before this year is over, you will hardly notice it at all. For now, you lie quietly beneath thick woolen blankets stuffed with feathers and straw. The warmth is comforting, but it never completely chases away the chill that lingers through the northern nights. Outside, the wind glides down from snow-dusted hills and across the still waters of the fjord, carrying the promise that today, like nearly every day here, will demand your attention from dawn until darkness. This is Scandinavia in the late 9th century, a land of towering mountains, deep forests, winding rivers, and narrow inlets where the sea reaches far inland. The landscape is breathtaking, but beauty alone cannot feed a family. Every valley that offers fertile soil has been carefully cleared by generations before you. Every pasture, every fishing ground, every stand of birch or pine is known intimately by the people who live here. The land is generous only to those who understand it. You are not a mighty warrior whose name will echo through sagas. You are not setting sail in search of distant kingdoms or glittering treasure. You are something far more common, and perhaps far more remarkable. You are an ordinary Norse farmer, one among thousands whose quiet labor makes every voyage, every market, and every feast possible. While stories often celebrate the explorers who crossed unknown seas, most people spend their lives much closer to home, measuring the passing seasons by the growth of barley, the health of sheep, and the changing color of the forests. A faint cough comes from the other side of the room as someone rises from their sleeping place. Soon another follows. There are no private bedrooms here. Families sleep together along the walls of the longhouse, separated more by habit than by barriers. The shared warmth is practical, especially during the long winters when cold presses relentlessly against the timber walls. Nearby, a child murmurs in sleep before settling once more beneath a woolen cloak. The fire at the center of the house has never been allowed to die completely. Throughout the night, someone carefully watched it, adding small pieces of wood whenever the flames began to fade. Fire is more than comfort. It dries clothing soaked by rain, cooks meals, provides light during endless winter evenings, and offers protection against the dampness that seems to seep into everything. Losing it would mean beginning again with precious tinder, a task nobody wishes to face. As you sit upright, your feet meet the cool wooden floor. Your clothing is simple but carefully made. A linen tunic rests beneath a thick woolen outer garment, woven patiently over countless hours. Every thread represents work done during quieter months, when daylight was too short for farming but long enough for spinning and weaving beside the fire. Clothes are not disposable possessions here. They are valuable, repaired repeatedly, and often handed down through generation. The doorway opens briefly, and a breath of icy air slips inside. Beyond it, the world is waking. A pale mist hangs over the fjord, drifting lazily above calm water that reflects the first hints of morning. Pine-covered slopes rise sharply from the shoreline, their dark silhouettes standing against a sky that slowly brightens from steel gray to soft gold. Somewhere beyond the trees, a raven calls, its voice echoing through the stillness before fading into silence. Outside the longhouse, life has already begun. Sheep shuffle inside their enclosure, impatient for food. A pair of goats nudge one another near the fence, their breath visible in the cold air. Chickens scratch cautiously through patches of frozen earth where yesterday's snow has begun to melt beneath the weak spring sun. Each animal represents security. Their milk, wool, meat, hides, and offspring may determine whether your household thrives or struggles when winter returns. Beyond the farm lie fields that appear quiet now, but only because the growing season has not yet fully begun. Soon they will demand constant care. Stones must be cleared, fences repaired, and soil prepared for barley, oats, and rye. Farming this far north is never easy. The growing season is short, and every week matters. A late frost or heavy storm can change the fortunes of an entire family. The fjord beside your home is equally important. Its waters provide fish throughout much of the year, while its sheltered surface serves as the road connecting scattered settlements. There are few broad highways crossing these mountains. Instead, boats carry neighbors to gatherings, merchants to markets, and travelers toward distant coasts. The sea that outsiders sometimes fear is simply another familiar companion, as ordinary as the paths leading through nearby forests. As morning light spreads across the valley, smoke begins rising from other longhouses scattered along the shoreline. Each belongs to families much like yours. Some own larger farms with more livestock. Others possess only enough land to support themselves. A few households include thralls, men and women who live without freedom and perform much of the hardest labor. Their lives are woven into the fabric of Norse society, a reminder that prosperity is not shared equally among all who call this place home. Yet no household survives entirely alone. Before long, neighbors will help one another raise new buildings, harvest crops, mend fishing nets, or bring livestock safely down from summer pastures. In return, your family will offer the same assistance when called upon. Survival depends not only upon strength or skill, but upon trust built over many seasons. You step outside at last, and the cold greets you immediately, sharp enough to sting your cheeks before slowly settling into something almost refreshing. The air smells of damp earth, pine resin, salt carried inland from the sea, and fresh wood recently split for the fire. High above, clouds drift slowly over snow-capped peaks that have watched countless generations live and disappear beneath them. You cannot yet know everything this landscape expects from you. Reading the weather by the shape of distant clouds, knowing when salmon return to the rivers, understanding which grasses make the best hay, recognizing the sound of thinning lake ice, preserving enough food to outlast winter, these are not lessons learned in a few weeks. They are knowledge passed quietly from parents to children, from neighbors to friends, across centuries of careful observation. Many people imagine Viking Scandinavia as a world defined by raids and battles. Those things certainly exist, and their stories travel far beyond these shores. But they are not what fills most mornings. Most mornings begin exactly like this one, with smoke rising from rooftops, animals waiting to be fed, fields needing attention, and families depending upon another day's honest work. The sun finally clears the distant ridge, spilling golden light across the calm waters of the fjord. Around you, the farm fully awakens. Buckets are lifted, doors creak open, voices call softly across the yard, and another ordinary day begins. Before long, you will discover that in this land, surviving a single day is rarely dramatic, but surviving an entire year requires a lifetime of knowledge. And with the morning chores already waiting, your true first day on the farm is about to begin. The morning has fully arrived by the time you cross the yard, though the sun still hangs low above the fjord. Its light is pale and cool, stretching long shadows across the damp ground. Overnight frost lingers in patches where the warmth has not yet reached, sparkling softly like scattered grains of silver. The air is still enough that every sound seems to travel farther than expected, the gentle bleating of sheep, the creak of wooden gates, the rhythmic tapping of a woodpecker somewhere among the birch trees. No one waits to tell you where to begin. There is no bell to signal the start of work, no written list of tasks pinned to a wall. Every member of the household already knows what the morning requires. These routines have been repeated so many times that they have become as dependable as the rising sun itself. You quickly discover that life here follows the needs of animals long before it follows the wishes of people. The sheep greet you with impatient voices as their pen is opened. Their thick wool, still carrying the damp scent of the previous day's rain, brushes against your legs as they push eagerly toward fresh grass. Lambs stay close beside their mothers, uncertain on their slender legs but already curious enough to wander a few cautious steps before hurrying back again. Nearby, the goats prove far less patient. They nudge one another toward the feeding trough, climbing over rocks and wooden rails with effortless balance. Their milk is precious, transformed into butter and cheese that can nourish the household through the darker months. Nothing they provide is wasted. Even the smallest chores matter more than they first appear. Water buckets must be filled before breakfast. Fences weakened by winter storms require constant repair. Loose boards invite wandering livestock, and a single missing animal can mean far more than the loss of meat or wool. Every sheep represents clothing for the coming winter. Every goat may help feed children when the fields lie buried beneath snow. As you carry water from a nearby spring, the wooden bucket feels heavier with every step. Cold droplets splash over your hands, numbing your fingers despite the growing warmth of the morning. The path has been worn smooth by generations walking the same route, their footsteps gradually shaping the land as surely as streams carve valleys. The farm itself is not large. It does not need to be. Clearing land from Scandinavia's forests demands enormous effort, and every cultivated field exists because countless trees were cut, roots dug from the earth, and stones hauled away one by one. Looking across the landscape, you notice rocky outcrops interrupting the fields like small islands. The soil is fertile where it gathers, but good farmland is never abundant. Barley grows best here. It is the crop upon which much of life depends. Some will become coarse bread baked on flat stones beside the fire. Some will be brewed into ale or mead for celebrations and everyday meals alike. Some must be carefully saved as seed for the following spring, no matter how tempting it may be to eat during a difficult winter. Every handful carries the future within it. An older member of the household kneels beside a broken fence post, examining the damage left by melting snow and frozen ground. Without many words, you join the work. Fresh-cut poles of pine are brought from a nearby pile, their resin filling the cool air with a clean, sharp fragrance. Iron nails are too valuable to use carelessly, so wooden pegs secure much of the structure instead. With practice movements, the post is lifted into place, earth packed tightly around its base until it stands firm once more. Nothing on the farm is built to be forgotten. Roofs need new turf. Walls require fresh clay. Tools demand sharpening. Ropes wear thin. Boats must be sealed with tar. Every season brings repairs alongside new work. The landscape itself never stops testing what people have built. As the morning continues, attention shifts toward the fields. Oxen move slowly ahead of a simple wooden plow tipped with iron. Their steady strength breaks the dark soil that has rested beneath winter's frozen grip. The pace is patient rather than hurried. Stones appear constantly, forcing the plow to stop while they are lifted aside. Some are carried to growing walls that mark the edges of the fields. Others simply become obstacles for another generation to move. You soon understand why every cleared acre is treasured. The earth offers little without effort. Women and children scatter behind the plow, carefully pressing seed into the loosened soil. Their movements are quiet and deliberate. Every handful is measured by experience rather than by counting. Seaweed and drying hemp. A small boat rests upside down nearby. Its hull bears the marks of many seasons. Tar must be brushed into tiny cracks before they widen. Wood swells and shrinks with changing weather. Ignoring such repairs would invite disaster far from shore. You begin to notice that nearly everything here survives because someone pays close attention. Not because life is easy. Because neglect is dangerous. As afternoon sunlight softens, children gather fallen branches from the nearby woods. Older boys split larger logs with heavy axes while younger ones stack firewood beneath covered shelters where rain cannot reach it. Fuel is never collected only for today. Every piece added to the growing pile is really a gift to the family that will gather around the hearth many months from now, when snow once again buries the fields. Evening approaches almost unnoticed. Long shadows stretch across the valley. The mountains surrounding the fjord glow with amber light before fading slowly into cool blue. Smoke rises lazily from neighboring farms as families prepare the evening meal. Somewhere across the water, the steady rhythm of an axe echoes faintly before disappearing into the stillness. The animals return willingly. The sheep know the path back to their enclosure. Goats wander in with only gentle encouragement. Chickens settle onto their perches as daylight fades. The farm grows quiet once more. Standing for a moment beside the longhouse, you look over everything accomplished in a single ordinary day. No battles were fought. No treasures discovered. Faintly before disappearing into the stillness. The animals return willingly. The sheep know the path back to their enclosure. Goats wander in with only gentle encouragement. Chickens settle onto their perches as daylight fades. The farm grows quiet once more. Standing for a moment beside the longhouse, you look over everything accomplished in a single ordinary day. No battles were fought. No battles were fought. No treasures discovered. No famous sagas written. Yet every repaired fence, every planted seed, every filled water bucket, every mended net has quietly protected the future of the household. This is the work upon which Viking society truly rests. Tomorrow will bring many of the same tasks again. The seasons leave little room for idleness, and every member of the family has a place within their steady rhythm. As the evening fire begins to glow through the doorway of the longhouse, you step inside, leaving the cool air behind. Only now, after your first full day of labor, do you begin to understand that the house itself is far more than a shelter from the weather. It is the warm heart of the farm, where every meal is shared, every story remembered, and every winter patiently endured. There, beside the ever-burning hearth, you will soon discover what life inside a Viking longhouse truly feels like. By the time you step back through the heavy wooden doorway, the evening sky has deepened into shades of violet and dark blue. Outside, the last light lingers over the fjord, reflecting softly across still water before disappearing behind the mountains. The day's work has ended, but life has not slowed. Instead, it has simply moved indoors, gathering around the warm center of the longhouse like birds returning to a familiar nest. The change is immediate. The cold air remains outside, replaced by a comforting warmth that wraps itself around you. Smoke from the central hearth rises in slow ribbons toward openings beneath the roof, though not all of it escapes. A faint haze hangs beneath the heavy beams, softening the flickering firelight until every corner seems wrapped in gentle shadow. The smell of burning oak, drying herbs, wool, leather, and fresh bread fills the room. It is rich without being overwhelming, the scent of a home that has sheltered generations through countless winters. Your eyes gradually adjust to the dimness. The longhouse stretches farther than it first appeared this morning. Thick timber posts support the roof, their surfaces darkened by decades of smoke. The walls are built from sturdy planks, carefully fitted together and strengthened with turf packed along the outside. In winter, that layer of earth helps keep warmth inside while shielding the house from biting northern winds. The roof itself is thick with sod, grasses, and moss that have taken root over the years. During warmer seasons, wildflowers sometimes bloom overhead, turning the house into something that seems to grow naturally from the hillside. From a distance, the longhouse blends quietly into the landscape, as though it belongs there as much as the surrounding forests. There are no bright windows flooding the room with daylight. Glass is rare and precious. Instead, narrow openings admit only modest amounts of light, enough for daily tasks but never enough to banish the shadows completely. During the long winter months, much of life unfolds beneath the glow of fire and small oil lamps, their flames dancing gently against carved wooden walls. The hearth occupies the very center of the building. Everything else seems arranged around it. Here meals are prepared. Stories are told. Tools are repaired. Children play. Visitors are welcomed. On cold nights, the fire becomes the beating heart of the household, its warmth reaching every person gathered nearby. You settle onto one of the long wooden benches that line either side of the room. During the day, these serve as places to work, eat, and rest. At night, they become sleeping spaces covered with furs, blankets, and straw-filled mattresses. Privacy, as people understand it in later centuries, scarcely exists here. Families live closely together, sharing warmth, conversation, and the rhythms of daily life. Far from feeling crowded, the closeness creates something else. A quiet sense of belonging. No one spends long hours alone. Children grow up surrounded by parents, grandparents, cousins, and neighbors who visit frequently. Knowledge passes naturally from one generation to the next, not through formal lessons but through countless evenings spent watching skilled hands at work. Near the hearth, an elderly woman spins wool into fine thread. Her fingers move with remarkable confidence, drawing soft fibers into even strands while the spindle turns almost effortlessly. She scarcely glances at her hands. Decades of practice have made the movement as natural as breathing. Nearby, another member of the household works a simple loom. The steady rhythm of wooden frames clicking together becomes part of the evening's gentle music. Cloth requires patience beyond measure. Before a single garment can be sewn, sheep must be raised, wool sheared, fibers cleaned, spun, dyed when possible, and finally woven into sturdy fabric. Every cloak you wear represents months of careful labor. Nothing is made quickly. Nothing is easily replaced. Across the room, a man sharpens an iron knife against a smooth whetstone. The sound is soft but steady. Each careful stroke preserves a valuable tool that may serve the family for decades. Iron is expensive here. Local bog ore can be smelted into usable metal, but the process demands charcoal, skilled craftsmanship, and many hours of work. Every blade, axe, nail, and chisel receives attentive care because replacing them is never simple. Even wooden objects display remarkable craftsmanship. Your drinking cup is carved from a single piece of birch. The spoon beside it has been shaped by hand until it fits comfortably in the palm. The chest against the wall carries intricate knotwork patterns whose flowing designs echo stories of serpents, trees, and endless paths. Beauty and usefulness live comfortably together. Even ordinary possessions deserve careful attention. The evening meal is served without ceremony. Large wooden bowls filled with thick barley porridge are passed from hand to hand. Smoked fish adds its rich flavor, while fresh cheese softens the meal with gentle creaminess. A little butter melts into the warm grain. Occasionally dried berries gathered during summer brighten the taste with unexpected sweetness. No extravagant feast awaits an ordinary farming family. Such celebrations are reserved for festivals or special occasions. Most evenings are pleasantly simple. Enough food to satisfy hunger. Enough warmth to ease tired muscles. Enough company to make the darkness outside seem distant. As everyone eats, conversation flows quietly around the room. Someone recalls seeing whales farther out in the fjord earlier this week. Another speaks of repairing a neighbor's boat before the spring fishing season begins. An older man tells a familiar story about a winter storm that trapped travelers in the mountains years ago, reminding younger listeners why weather must never be underestimated. Stories here serve many purposes. They entertain. They preserve history. They teach. They warn. Few people can read, and fewer still possess written books. Instead, memory carries the wisdom of past generations. Tales repeated beside countless evening fires become living libraries, passed from one voice to another. Some stories speak of gods. Not as distant beings separated from daily life, but as familiar presences woven into the world around you. Thunder may remind someone of Thor riding across the heavens. A clever solution to a difficult problem might earn quiet comparison to Odin's endless search for wisdom. Sacred stories live comfortably alongside ordinary conversation, neither demanding constant attention nor disappearing from everyday thought. After supper, the household does not simply rest. Hands remain busy. Fishing hooks are fashioned from bone. Leather boots receive fresh stitching where seams have begun to wear. Ropes are twisted from plant fibers. Small wooden toys are carved for children sitting quietly nearby. Winter evenings especially become seasons of craftsmanship, when darkness limits outdoor work but offers long hours for creating everything the family will need throughout the coming year. You begin to understand that idleness is uncommon. Not because anyone forces constant labor. Because every useful object represents security. Every repaired cloak means greater warmth. Every woven blanket means better sleep. Every sharpened axe means easier work when spring returns. As darkness settles fully outside, the sounds beyond the walls grow softer. The sheep occasionally shift in their shelter. Wind brushes gently across the turf roof. Somewhere far off, an owl calls through the forest before silence returns once more. Inside, however, life continues beneath the warm glow of firelight. Children slowly grow drowsy. One by one they curl beneath woolen blankets. An elder quietly adds another log to the hearth, sending sparks swirling briefly upward before settling once more into steady flames. The fire must last until morning. Someone will wake during the night to feed it. No one complains. It is simply another responsibility shared by the household. Looking around the room, you notice that the longhouse is far more than wood, earth, and thatch. It is a shelter built from cooperation. Every beam was raised by many hands. Every meal depends upon shared effort. Every child learns because older generations remain close enough to teach. The house itself reflects the society beyond its walls. No individual survives here entirely alone. Outside, the stars slowly appear above the silent fjord. Tomorrow's work already waits beyond the doorway, but for now there is peace in the steady crackle of the hearth and the quiet voices fading into sleep. Before long, your thoughts drift toward another question that every household must answer, regardless of season. Warm walls and skilled hands are not enough on their own. Tomorrow, you will discover how every meal reaches this table, through fishing, farming, gathering, and preserving the gifts of a landscape that can be both generous and unforgiving. Morning arrives with the gentle sound of rain tapping against the turf roof. It is not a fierce storm, only a quiet spring shower drifting inland from the sea. The drops fall steadily upon the longhouse, filling the air with the fresh scent of wet earth and pine needles. When you step outside, the world seems washed clean. Mist clings to the slopes above the fjord, softening the outlines of distant mountains until they appear to float among the clouds. Tiny beads of water rest on every blade of grass, catching the pale morning light like scattered glass. Rain does not stop the day's work. In Viking-age Scandinavia, meals do not appear by chance. Every loaf of bread, every piece of smoked fish, every cup of milk is the result of careful planning and countless hours of labor. The land provides generously, but only to those who understand its seasons. A family that fails to prepare during the warmer months may find little comfort when winter closes the mountain passes and freezes the fields beneath snow. The first task of the morning takes you toward the shore. The path winds between patches of birch and pine before opening onto the quiet edge of the fjord. The water lies almost perfectly still, disturbed only by gentle ripples spreading outward from a pair of ducks gliding across the surface. Farther out, seabirds circle patiently above schools of fish, their sharp cries echoing between the cliffs. A small wooden fishing boat waits where it was pulled onto the shore the evening before. Its hull is narrow, built to move easily through calm coastal waters rather than the open ocean. The wood smells faintly of pine tar, rubbed carefully into every seam to keep the vessel watertight. Oars rest inside, polished smooth by years of use. Nothing aboard is decorative. Every piece serves a purpose. You and another member of the household push the boat gently into the water. It rocks softly beneath your weight before settling into a steady rhythm. The oars dip quietly into the fjord, barely disturbing its mirror-like surface. Around you, the mountains rise almost straight from the sea, their slopes covered with dark evergreen forests broken only by rocky cliffs and the occasional ribbon of white where melting snow feeds narrow waterfalls. The silence feels complete. Only the steady splash of oars accompanies your journey. Fishing is among the most dependable sources of food in Scandinavia. The fjords teem with life throughout much of the year. Cod, herring, salmon, trout, and many smaller fish provide nourishment that can be eaten fresh or preserved for months to come. Experienced fishermen know where certain species gather, how the tides influence their movements, and which weather brings the best catches. Such knowledge cannot be written in a book. It is earned through years spent watching the sea. You help lower a carefully woven net into the cold water. Each knot has been tied by hand. Each repair made during winter evenings now proves worthwhile. The net sinks slowly beneath the surface, almost disappearing into the deep blue beneath the boat. Then comes the waiting. There is no hurry. Patience is part of the work. As you drift gently with the current, your companion points toward the distant shoreline, where seals sometimes rest upon smooth rocks. Occasionally whales enter these waters, though they remain rare visitors. Even the birds become useful guides. A sudden gathering of gulls often signals fish feeding below, revealing places worth exploring. When the net is finally lifted, silver bodies flash in the morning light. Several large cod twist and shimmer as they emerge from the water. Smaller fish become tangled among the ropes, their scales reflecting every shade of blue and white beneath the overcast sky. It is a modest catch, but a welcome one. Not every day brings overflowing nets, and no sensible family expects abundance every time they leave shore. Back at the farm, the fish are cleaned almost immediately. Nothing is wasted. Sharp knives separate flesh from bone with practiced efficiency. Some fish will be roasted over the hearth before sunset. Others are split open, rubbed generously with salt where available, and hung upon wooden racks to dry in the cool northern air. Drying preserves food remarkably well, allowing families to store valuable protein for the months when fresh catches become more difficult. Smokehouses stand nearby, their slow-burning fires adding another layer of protection. The fragrant smoke curls around rows of hanging fish, preserving them while giving them a rich, distinctive flavor. Long after summer has passed, these carefully prepared stores will still nourish the household through snow and darkness. The sea feeds you, but it cannot feed you alone. Beyond the shoreline, the fields continue demanding attention. Young barley shoots have begun pushing through the damp soil, their bright green leaves promising the harvest still many months away. They appear delicate, yet each tiny plant carries enormous importance. Grain forms the foundation of nearly every meal. Unlike wheat, which struggles in colder northern climates, barley thrives during Scandinavia's short growing season. From it come coarse loaves baked upon flat stones. Thick porridge simmered over the fire. Ale brewed for everyday drinking. Even festive meals begin with humble grain. Nearby, women kneel among small vegetable plots. Onions, cabbage, peas, beans, and hardy herbs grow wherever the soil allows. Gardens may seem modest beside the surrounding forests, but they provide welcome variety after long winters spent eating preserved foods. Every fresh leaf signals that another difficult season has been survived. The forests themselves offer quiet gifts. As spring slowly deepens into early summer, edible plants begin appearing beneath the trees. Wild garlic scents the damp ground. Sorrel adds a pleasant sharpness to stews. Mushrooms emerge after gentle rains, though gathering them requires experience. Mistaking one species for another can bring dangerous consequences. Later in the year, blueberries, raspberries, lingonberries, and cloudberries will color the woodland paths. Children often help gather them, returning with stained hands and woven baskets filled to the brim. Some berries are eaten immediately, while others are dried or preserved for winter. Nature rewards those who observe carefully. Livestock continue their own quiet contribution. The cows provide milk when grazing is good. Goats produce rich milk even on rougher hillsides. Sheep offer both wool and occasional meat. Chickens lay eggs throughout much of the warmer months. Even pigs, allowed to forage among oak forests where available, transform acorns and roots into valuable food. Keeping animals alive through winter, however, is no simple matter. During summer, hay must be cut, dried, and stored in astonishing quantities. Every sunny day becomes precious. Rain can spoil an entire field of drying grass if left too long. Families work quickly, turning the hay with wooden rakes before carrying it into barns where it will remain dry until snowfall returns. Looking across the growing stacks, you begin to understand something important. These towering piles of grass are not merely animal feed. They are winter itself, gathered piece by piece beneath the summer sun. Without enough hay, livestock weaken. Without livestock, milk disappears. Without milk, butter and cheese vanish. Without those foods, survival becomes far more uncertain. As evening approaches, the longhouse once again fills with familiar aromas. Fresh fish roasts above glowing embers. A pot of barley porridge bubbles gently beside the fire. Herbs gathered from the garden add subtle fragrance to the meal, while soft cheese rests upon wooden boards beside warm bread baked earlier in the day. The food is simple. It is nourishing rather than extravagant. No spices from distant lands flavor an ordinary family supper. No endless banquet stretches across the table. Yet every bite reflects months, or even years, of careful work. The bread carries memories of spring planting and autumn harvest. The cheese recalls patient mornings spent milking goats. The fish speaks of calm waters and steady hands upon the oars. Even the fire beneath the cooking pot reminds you of wood gathered months before. Here, every meal tells the story of many seasons. As darkness settles outside, rain begins once more, falling softly upon the roof while the family gathers around the hearth. The warmth feels especially welcome after the cool air beside the fjord. Voices remain gentle, laughter quiet, and the firelight dances across carved wooden bowls that have served countless suppers before this one. You are beginning to understand why surviving in Viking Scandinavia has little to do with strength alone. It is about foresight. About preserving food before hunger arrives. About recognizing when fish migrate, when berries ripen, and when hay is dry enough to store. It is a life built upon careful preparation rather than sudden heroism. Beyond your own farm, however, dozens of other households are making the same quiet preparations. Tomorrow, you will walk beyond your familiar fields to meet the neighbors whose friendship, trust, and shared labor make life in this rugged land not only possible, but enduring. The rain has passed during the night, leaving the morning washed in quiet clarity. When you step outside the longhouse, the air feels cool and clean, carrying the scent of damp pine, fresh grass, and the salt of the nearby fjord. Tiny droplets cling to every branch of the birch trees, sparkling whenever the rising sun finds them. Wisps of mist drift lazily across the water before slowly dissolving into the warming sky. Somewhere beyond the shoreline, a raven glides silently between towering spruce trees, its dark wings almost disappearing against the forest. Today, your work will take you beyond the familiar boundaries of your own farm. The path leading toward neighboring homesteads is narrow but well-worn, winding between stone walls built over generations. Moss grows thick upon the larger rocks, while small wildflowers bloom wherever sunlight reaches the forest floor. The journey is peaceful, and yet every step reminds you that this landscape has been shaped not only by nature but by countless families working together over hundreds of years. Unlike the crowded cities that will one day spread across Europe, settlements here are scattered. Most farms stand apart from one another, separated by fields, forests, or stretches of shoreline. Some lie only a short walk away, while others require a journey by boat across the fjord. From above, the community would appear as a handful of wooden roofs scattered across an immense wilderness. Despite the distance between homes, no family is truly isolated. In fact, surviving here would be nearly impossible without neighbors. As you approach the nearest farm, smoke rises gently from its turf-covered roof. Chickens wander freely through the yard, scratching beneath stacked firewood while a pair of children chase one another between drying racks hung with fish. A woman pauses from spinning wool to offer a warm smile before returning to her work. Nearby, an elderly man slowly carves a new handle for an axe, carefully shaping the smooth ash wood with practiced hands. There is no sense that you are entering a stranger's home. Hospitality is expected. A traveler who arrives peacefully is usually welcomed with warmth, offered food if supplies allow, and invited to rest by the fire. Such kindness is not merely generosity. It is practical wisdom. Anyone may someday become the traveler seeking shelter from an early snowfall or an unexpected storm. In a land where weather changes quickly, today's host may become tomorrow's guest. Soon you discover why so many hands have gathered. A new storage building is being raised beside the farmhouse. Its heavy timber beams already lie neatly arranged upon the ground, waiting to become walls that will protect grain through the coming winters. No single household could lift such enormous logs alone. Instead, neighbors arrive throughout the morning, each bringing tools, experience, and willing hands. Without discussion, everyone seems to understand their role. Some strip bark from freshly cut pine. Others fit wooden pegs into carefully drilled holes. Strong shoulders lift beams into place while older members of the community guide each movement with calm instruction. Children gather smaller branches for future firewood or fetch water from a nearby stream. Even those too old for heavy lifting contribute by preparing meals or watching over younger children. Here, every person has something valuable to offer. As the building slowly rises, conversation drifts gently between the workers. News travels this way. Someone speaks of traders expected to arrive before midsummer. Another has spotted seals farther north along the coast. A fisherman describes unusually large shoals of herring seen near the mouth of the fjord. One family mentions that wolves have been heard in the forests beyond the mountains, reminding everyone to keep sheep safely enclosed after sunset. No one consults written reports. Knowledge moves from voice to voice. Every shared observation strengthens the community's ability to prepare. By midday, work pauses. Long wooden boards are laid across sturdy barrels, creating a simple table beneath the open sky. Bowls of thick vegetable stew are passed around alongside warm barley bread, fresh butter, smoked fish, and soft goat's cheese. Wooden cups filled with mild ale make their way from hand to hand. The meal is unhurried. Laughter rises occasionally before fading back into quiet conversation. Children dart between the adults, inventing games with carved wooden animals and smooth stones collected from the shoreline. Watching them, you realize that childhood here begins with responsibility but still leaves room for joy. Young boys and girls learn practical skills almost as soon as they can walk. They help feed chickens, gather eggs, carry kindling, watch younger siblings, collect berries, drive sheep toward pasture. Their lessons come through participation rather than formal instruction. By growing alongside experienced adults, they gradually absorb the countless pieces of knowledge that make life possible. No classroom could teach what a changing sky, a quiet forest, or a patient grandmother teaches every single day. As afternoon sunlight filters through the trees, an elderly neighbor begins telling a familiar story. The children gather first. Soon several adults pause their work to listen as well. His tale speaks of an ancestor who once survived an exceptionally harsh winter by sharing his final stores of grain with neighboring families. When spring finally arrived, every household repaid the kindness many times over. Whether every detail of the story is true matters less than the lesson it carries. Generosity creates strength. Isolation creates weakness. This belief shapes much of village life. The community also depends upon trust. A borrowed axe is expected to be returned. Animals wandering into another family's pasture are brought back rather than claimed. Promises carry enormous weight because written contracts are uncommon. A person's reputation becomes one of their greatest possessions. Honor is not measured by dramatic acts alone. It grows quietly through reliability. Keeping one's word. Helping during harvest. Sharing labor when storms damage a roof. Standing beside neighbors during difficult seasons. Over many years, these ordinary actions create bonds stronger than timber. Not everyone, however, occupies the same place within society. Some families own larger farms, richer grazing land, or greater numbers of livestock. Others struggle with smaller holdings where every harvest feels uncertain. Some households include thralls, men and women who perform demanding labor while living without personal freedom. You notice one young man carrying heavy beams throughout the day under the watchful eye of his master. He works beside everyone else, yet his position remains different. Thralls form a real part of Viking society. Some were captured during warfare. Others were born into slavery. A few eventually earned or purchased their freedom. Their lives remind you that this community, while close-knit, is not equal for everyone. As the afternoon fades, the final roof beam is lifted into place. A cheer rises from the gathered families, not loud or triumphant, but warm with quiet satisfaction. The hardest work is finished. The building will still require walls, shelves, and careful sealing before winter, yet another important task has been completed together. No payment changes hands. None is expected. When your own family needs help repairing a roof, harvesting barley before a storm, or launching a newly built boat, these same neighbors will come without hesitation. The debt is one of friendship rather than silver. Walking home beside the fjord, the setting sun paints the water in shades of gold and copper. Fishing boats drift slowly toward shore while thin columns of smoke rise once again from scattered longhouses. The village seems peaceful, almost timeless. Yet beneath its quiet routines lies an invisible framework holding everything together. People cooperate not simply because they enjoy one another's company. They cooperate because survival demands it. Still, even the closest community cannot rely on goodwill alone. Disagreements arise. Property boundaries become uncertain. Promises are broken. Questions of inheritance, marriage, and justice must eventually be settled. Tomorrow, you will journey to one of the most remarkable institutions in the Viking world, not a castle, nor a royal court, but an open gathering beneath the sky where farmers, craftsmen, and chieftains come together to decide what is fair. There, at the Thing Assembly, you will discover that the strength of Norse society rests not only on shared labor, but on shared law. The morning begins earlier than usual. Long before the first rays of sunlight reach the valley, quiet footsteps move through the longhouse. Someone stirs the embers until the fire glows once more, and the familiar scent of smoke slowly fills the room. A simple breakfast of barley bread, goat's cheese, and yesterday's smoked fish is shared in near silence. Today's journey is longer than the walk to a neighboring farm, and everyone wishes to reach their destination before the gathering begins. You pull your woolen cloak tightly around your shoulders as you step into the cool dawn. The air is crisp enough that each breath briefly clouds before disappearing. Dew covers the grass, soaking your boots as you follow the narrow path leading away from the farm. The fjord lies calm beside you, reflecting a sky slowly changing from deep blue to pale gold. Somewhere across the water, another family has already begun rowing toward the same destination. Today is the day of the Thing. For people living in Viking-age Scandinavia, this gathering is among the most important events of the year. There is no great stone courthouse waiting beyond the hills. No towering palace where distant officials hand down commands. Instead, justice meets beneath the open sky. The Thing is both practical and deeply respected. It is where disputes are settled, agreements are witnessed, marriages may be announced, trade is encouraged, and the shared customs of the community are renewed. It reminds everyone that even in a land of scattered farms and distant valleys, they belong to something larger than their own household. As the path widens, more travelers join the journey. A family arrives leading 2 sturdy horses laden with sacks of wool and bundles of carefully worked leather. Behind them walk fishermen carrying barrels that smell faintly of salted herring. A blacksmith balances a basket of newly forged tools across his shoulder, while children skip ahead, delighted simply to see so many familiar faces gathered in one place. The atmosphere is calm, almost festive. Although serious matters will be discussed before the day is over, the Thing is also a rare opportunity for people separated by mountains and water to meet friends they have not seen for months. By mid-morning, the gathering place comes into view. It is not marked by high walls or elaborate buildings. Instead, it occupies a broad meadow beside a clear stream, surrounded by gentle hills and ancient trees. Flat stones form natural places to stand or sit, while open ground provides enough space for hundreds of people to assemble. The location has been used for generations, perhaps even centuries. Countless footsteps have crossed this same grass, wearing familiar paths into the earth. Around the edges of the meadow, temporary shelters have already been raised. Smoke curls upward from small cooking fires. Merchants arrange their goods upon wooden tables. Children chase one another through the crowd while dogs weave patiently between their owners. Voices drift softly through the cool air, blending into a steady murmur that rises and falls like waves upon the shore. You soon notice how differently people dress. Most farmers wear simple woolen tunics much like your own. Some wealthier families display brightly dyed cloaks fastened with finely crafted brooches of bronze or silver. A few respected chieftains stand out through the quality of their clothing rather than extravagant decoration. Status is visible, but not shouted. Practicality remains more important than display. As the gathering begins, conversation gradually quiets. People form a wide circle around a raised patch of ground where one respected elder steps forward. He is known not because he commands an army, but because he remembers the law. In a world where written books are rare and many people cannot read, memory becomes an extraordinary skill. The laws of the community are carried not on parchment, but in the minds of those trusted to preserve them. Patiently, clearly, the elder begins to speak. His voice carries across the meadow. No one interrupts. Every family listens carefully. The words have been repeated countless times before, ensuring that each generation remembers the customs that hold society together. You begin to understand that Viking law is not built solely upon punishment. Its purpose is to restore balance whenever possible. Many disagreements involve matters that seem ordinary. A boundary stone moved during winter floods. Livestock wandering into another family's pasture. Disputes over inheritance after the death of a parent. Promises concerning marriage. Ownership of woodland or fishing rights. Each question affects real lives. Each deserves careful consideration. The first case concerns two neighboring farmers arguing over the ownership of several sheep. One insists the animals were born from his flock. The other claims they wandered during the previous autumn. Neither man raises his voice. Instead, each presents witnesses. Neighbors describe what they remember seeing. Older members of the community recall familiar markings cut into the animal's ears. Patiently, the gathering weighs every account before reaching a decision accepted by both families. Justice here depends as much upon reputation as evidence. A person known for honesty carries greater trust than someone who has repeatedly broken promises. Your name matters. Your word matters. Years of honorable behavior may shape the outcome of a single disagreement. As the day continues, another case proves more serious. A young man admits striking another during an argument that left lasting injury. The community does not celebrate violence. Instead, attention turns toward repairing the damage. Compensation is discussed. Witnesses describe exactly what happened. Family members from both sides speak carefully, hoping to prevent anger from growing into a feud that could divide neighbors for generations. You realize that peace requires constant effort. It does not simply happen. The thing exists partly to prevent private revenge from becoming endless cycles of bloodshed. Sometimes reconciliation succeeds. Sometimes it does not. Yet the attempt itself reveals how deeply the community values stability. Honor, you discover, is often misunderstood by people living many centuries later. It is not merely courage in battle. It is reliability. Keeping agreements. Supporting relatives. Treating guests fairly. Accepting responsibility when mistakes are made. Defending one's family without seeking unnecessary conflict. Honor grows through countless ordinary choices rather than dramatic moments alone. During breaks between legal discussions, the gathering becomes lively once again. Farmers exchange news of the coming harvest. Fishermen compare the movements of herring along the coast. Children eagerly watch traveling craftsmen demonstrate delicate silverwork or finely carved wooden bowls. Musicians play quiet melodies upon simple flutes while merchants negotiate the value of wool, amber, iron tools, and carefully woven cloth. The thing serves many purposes at once. Court. Marketplace. Festival. Community meeting. News network. Marriage gathering. Political discussion. Its many roles blend together naturally because every part strengthens the others. Toward afternoon, an elderly woman quietly carves several runes into a small piece of smooth birch wood. A younger girl watches closely beside her. The older woman explains each symbol patiently. Runes are used for short messages, ownership marks, memorial stones, and occasional expressions of belief. Most communication remains spoken, but these carved signs carry their own quiet power. Knowledge passes from one generation to another once again, not inside formal schools, but through observation, practice, and shared experience. As the sun begins sinking lower across the sky, the formal proceedings gradually conclude. People linger rather than rushing home. Old friends embrace. Children grow sleepy after a day filled with excitement. Merchants finish their final exchanges before carefully packing their remaining goods. One by one, families begin following familiar paths back toward distant farms scattered along the fjords. Walking home, you notice how peaceful the countryside feels after the gentle bustle of the gathering. The mountains remain unchanged. The forests whisper softly in the evening breeze. The sea reflects the warm colors of sunset just as it did that morning. Yet something important has happened. No fortress has been built. No army has marched. No king has issued commands. Instead, an entire community has renewed its trust in one another through conversation, memory, and shared customs. You now understand that Viking society survives not simply because its people are hardy, but because they possess institutions that allow cooperation to endure across generations. And as you descend toward the shoreline, where several unfamiliar boats rest quietly beside the landing place, you realize that tomorrow's lessons will come not from farmers or lawmakers, but from the travelers who connect this remote valley to lands far beyond the northern sea. The morning after the thing feels unusually lively. Even before the first rays of sunlight reach the fjord, unfamiliar voices drift across the quiet water. From the doorway of the longhouse, you notice several boats resting along the shoreline where none had been the evening before. Their hulls are broader than the small fishing craft used by your neighbors, built not for casting nets but for carrying heavy cargo over long distances. Thin ribbons of smoke rise into the still morning air as travelers prepare their breakfasts. The scent is slightly different from that of your own household. Along with burning pine and damp wool, there are unfamiliar aromas carried from distant shores, strange herbs, richly tanned leather, beeswax, and the faint sweetness of imported honey. The fjord, so peaceful most days, has quietly become a crossroads. Although your village feels remote, it is not isolated. The waterways that weave through Scandinavia connect thousands of farms, settlements, and harbors. A boat launched here may eventually reach the Danish coast, the islands of the Baltic, the rivers leading deep into Eastern Europe, or even the bustling markets of lands far to the south. Most people never travel so far. Yet the wider world still finds its way to them. You walk toward the landing place where merchants have begun arranging their goods upon woven blankets spread across the grass. There are no permanent shops, no rows of market stalls built from stone. Trade happens wherever people gather, at sheltered harbors, seasonal markets, and assemblies like yesterday's thing. The atmosphere is calm. Nobody shouts to attract customers. Conversations begin slowly, often between people who have met before during previous seasons. Trust, once again, proves more valuable than speed. The first merchant you meet has traveled from another part of Scandinavia. His boat carries bundles of high-quality timber cut from dense northern forests where trees grow tall and straight. Beside them lie barrels of pine tar, thick and dark, its sharp scent filling the air whenever a lid is lifted. Tar may not seem remarkable at first glance. Yet without it, boats would slowly leak as seawater found its way between wooden planks. Every ship, from the smallest fishing vessel to the largest ocean-going longship, depends upon careful layers of warm tar pressed into its seams. A nearby craftsman examines each barrel with practiced eyes before agreeing upon a fair exchange. Nothing is wasted. Not even tree resin. Farther along the shore, another trader unfolds beautifully woven cloth dyed in shades of deep blue and muted red. Such colors are difficult to produce. Plants must be gathered at precisely the right season. Dyes prepared with patience. Threads woven tightly enough to endure years of wear. For wealthier families, brightly colored clothing quietly signals prosperity. For ordinary farmers, undyed wool remains more common, though even simple garments are often decorated with careful stitching that reflects pride in skilled workmanship. You pause beside a blacksmith whose temporary forge has already been assembled. A small charcoal fire glows beneath a clay-lined hearth while a leather bellows feeds fresh air into the flames. Soon the iron begins to glow a deep orange. The blacksmith lifts it carefully with long tongs. Each strike of his hammer rings across the harbor. Clear. Steady. Unhurried. Children gather nearby, watching with wide eyes as the glowing metal slowly changes shape. An axe head emerges first. Then a small knife. Later, several sturdy nails. Every blow is deliberate. Iron is far too valuable for careless mistakes. You have already learned how important tools are on the farm. Now you begin to understand why. A sharp axe clears forests more quickly. A strong knife prepares food with greater ease. Well-made nails strengthen boats and buildings alike. Good craftsmanship saves time, reduces labor, and often lasts long enough to serve more than one generation. Not far away, another artisan works with wood instead of metal. He sits quietly upon a low stool, surrounded by curls of freshly carved birch that scatter across the ground like pale ribbons. In his hands, an ordinary block of wood slowly becomes something graceful. A drinking cup appears. Then delicate knotwork begins winding around its sides. The patterns seem endless, flowing into themselves without clear beginning or end. Such designs decorate countless Norse objects. Boxes, doorways, spoons, bedposts, even the handles of everyday tools. Beauty belongs not only in great halls but in ordinary homes. Nearby, women display carefully woven textiles. The fabrics vary in thickness according to their purpose. Fine linen for lighter clothing. Heavy wool for cloaks. Soft blankets to keep children warm through winter nights. Every piece represents months of labor. Sheep must first provide the wool. The fibers cleaned. Spun into thread. Dyed when possible. Finally woven upon looms standing patiently inside longhouses during the dark months of winter. Cloth is wealth. Sometimes it even serves as payment when silver is scarce. Silver, however, remains the most desired medium of exchange. One merchant opens a small leather pouch. Inside lie neatly cut fragments of silver bracelets and coins from distant lands. Rather than counting stamped coins by their face value, many Norse traders simply weigh the metal itself. Small balance scales appear. Tiny bronze weights are placed carefully upon one side. Pieces of silver are added to the other until perfect balance is achieved. A coin struck hundreds of miles away becomes simply another piece of precious metal. Its origin matters less than its weight. You notice something unfamiliar among the silver. Several coins bear elegant flowing writing unlike the runes you have seen carved into wood and stone. These arrived through trade stretching far beyond Scandinavia. Some come from the lands ruled by powerful Islamic caliphates to the southeast. Others have traveled through countless hands before finally reaching this quiet fjord. Their long journeys remind you that Viking trade reaches astonishing distances. While stories often remember raiding, commerce quietly connects far more people than conflict ever could. As the day continues, strangers share stories of places almost impossible to imagine. One sailor describes broad rivers flowing through endless forests in the east. Another speaks of crowded ports where ships from dozens of different peoples anchor side by side. A traveler who recently returned from Iceland tells of steaming hot springs, towering cliffs filled with nesting seabirds, and vast landscapes where few people yet live. The listeners gather closely. Not because these tales promise adventure, but because every story expands their understanding of the world. For most families here, such distant lands remain places of imagination. Yet through trade, pieces of those worlds arrive upon familiar shores. Amber from the Baltic. Glass beads crafted far to the south. Fine whetstones from Norway's mountains. Furs from northern forests. Honey. Wax. Iron. Salt. Each object carries invisible memories of many rivers, roads, and seas crossed before reaching your village. By afternoon, agreements have been made. Bundles exchanged. Promises renewed for next year's gathering. Boats gradually begin loading their cargo once more. Heavy sacks of wool replace barrels already traded away. Timber is stacked carefully beneath tightly tied ropes. The harbor slowly returns to its quieter rhythm. Watching the merchants depart, you realize that prosperity depends upon far more than what a single farm can produce. Every community specializes according to its landscape. Some harvest fish. Others raise livestock. Some mine iron. Others craft beautiful jewelry or sturdy ships. Trade allows these different strengths to support one another. As the last boat disappears around the curve of the fjord, only gentle waves remain. The shoreline grows peaceful again. Yet your attention lingers on one particular vessel resting farther down the beach. Unlike the cargo boats that have just departed, its long, elegant hull sits unusually low in the water. Its planks overlap with remarkable precision. Its curved bow rises proudly toward the sky, carved into the graceful shape of a dragon's head. Several skilled shipwrights stand beside it, carefully examining every timber before beginning another day's work. Tomorrow, you will step closer to one of the greatest achievements of Viking craftsmanship, not as a symbol of conquest, but as the remarkable machine that connected scattered farms, distant markets, and unknown horizons across the northern seas. The morning begins with the steady rhythm of axes echoing through the forest. Long before you reach the shoreline, the sounds guide your footsteps. Sharp strikes ring out among the pines, followed by the slow groan of timber leaning before finally settling onto the soft earth with a muffled crash. Birds flutter briefly from the branches above, only to return moments later as the forest resumes its quiet calm. Today, your work will not be in the fields or beside the fishing nets. Instead, you will spend the day with the shipwrights, the craftsmen whose knowledge allows the people of Scandinavia to travel across rivers, fjords, and open seas. For many generations, these builders have transformed living trees into vessels capable of carrying families, merchants, explorers, and fishermen across waters that often appear both beautiful and unforgiving. As you enter the forest, the scent of fresh pine fills the cool morning air. Wood shavings cover the ground like pale curls of ribbon. Sunlight filters through the tall trunks, painting shifting patterns across moss-covered stones. Several men pause beside an enormous oak that was felled only yesterday. Its broad trunk stretches across the forest floor, revealing tightly packed rings that quietly record decades of slow growth. Not every tree becomes part of a ship. The builders examine each one carefully before the first cut is made. They look for gentle natural curves that will one day become the ribs supporting the hull. Straight sections are reserved for planks or masts. Even the roots are inspected, for their unusual shape sometimes provide exactly the strength needed where the bow meets the keel. Nothing is chosen by chance. Generations of experience have taught these craftsmen how the forest itself offers solutions long before tools begin their work. The keel is the first great piece to take shape. It forms the spine of the vessel, the foundation upon which everything else depends. Without a strong keel, no ship can withstand rough seas. You watch a skilled hand shave away rough edges with broad axes whose polished blades reflect the morning light. There is surprisingly little wasted motion. Each swing seems almost effortless, guided more by memory than by force. Unlike later sawmills, much of the timber is split rather than sawn. Wood naturally follows its grain, producing planks that remain stronger and more flexible. Large wooden wedges are driven carefully into the log with heavy mallets. One by one, they open long, clean cracks that travel the length of the trunk. Slowly, the tree reveals the boards hidden inside it. The smell of fresh oak surrounds you. It is warm, slightly sweet, and unmistakably alive. Nearby, another group shapes planks with draw knives, pulling the blades steadily toward themselves while thin ribbons of wood gather at their feet. Hour after hour, the pieces gradually become smooth enough to fit together with remarkable precision. The longship is unlike many boats built elsewhere. Its sides are formed using overlapping planks, each resting partly upon the one below it. This method, known today as clinker construction, creates a hull that is both light and flexible. Rather than resisting every wave with rigid strength, the ship moves gently with the sea, bending just enough to absorb its endless motion. Such flexibility is one reason these vessels become so admired. They are fast, strong, remarkably graceful. You notice that iron nails are used sparingly but carefully. Each one has been forged by hand. After passing through overlapping planks, the nail is bent back upon itself against a small iron washer, locking the wood securely together. Thousands of these rivets hold the vessel as one. Every single one must be placed correctly. A careless mistake could weaken the entire hull. As midday approaches, the skeleton of the ship begins to emerge more clearly. Curving ribs rise from the keel like the bones of some enormous sea creature resting upon the shore. The shape seems almost elegant before the outer planks have even been completed. Nothing about it feels heavy. Everything suggests movement. The ship appears eager for water long before it ever touches the sea. Work pauses briefly for the midday meal. The craftsmen gather beneath the shade of several pines overlooking the fjord. They eat coarse barley bread, smoked fish, soft cheese, and dried apples saved from the previous autumn. Someone passes around a small wooden cup of ale, and quiet conversation drifts toward weather, timber supplies, and the coming summer. One older shipwright tells a story about a vessel he helped build many years earlier. It carried traders to distant markets beyond the Baltic Sea before returning safely after many seasons. Another remembers repairing storm damage during a harsh autumn voyage. Neither man boasts. They simply speak of ships as farmers speak of fields or shepherds speak of sheep. For them, building boats is not an extraordinary achievement. It is simply their life's work. After the meal, attention turns toward sealing the hull. Great iron pots warm thick pine tar until it becomes soft enough to spread. The scent is sharp and earthy, filling the shoreline with an aroma that seems permanently linked to Scandinavian harbors. Using rough brushes and pieces of cloth, the builders press the dark tar carefully into every seam between the overlapping planks. Even the smallest gap receives attention. Water is patient. If ignored, it always finds a way inside. You begin to appreciate how much of life here depends upon patient maintenance. Roofs require fresh turf. Fishing nets need constant repair. Axes must remain sharp. Fields demand careful tending. Ships are no different. A vessel survives not because it was built well once, but because people continue caring for it year after year. Nearby, several women sit beneath an open shelter working on something equally important. The sail. Long strips of tightly woven wool lie stretched across wooden frames. Each section has taken months to produce. The wool came from sheep carefully raised through winter. It was washed, combed, spun into thread, and woven into heavy cloth before being treated with animal fat and other materials that help resist wind and rain. The finished sail is astonishingly valuable. Often, it requires even more labor than the wooden hull itself. Without it, the finest ship remains little more than a drifting log. As afternoon sunlight glitters across the fjord, a young apprentice begins carving the dragon head that will decorate the prow. Its curling lines resemble the knotwork patterns you admired upon drinking cups and chests. The carving is beautiful, but it is not merely decoration. Many Norse people believe such figures help protect the vessel or inspire respect among those who see it approaching. Yet tradition also teaches that these carved heads may be removed when returning peacefully to one's own harbor, so as not to offend the protective spirits believed to dwell upon familiar shores. Practical life and belief once again exist side by side. By late afternoon, several men prepare to test the nearly finished hull. Using thick ropes and wooden rollers, they begin the slow process of moving the ship toward the water. Neighbors gather from nearby farms to help. The vessel is simply too large for a handful of builders alone. Shoulders lean together. Commands remain calm. With steady effort, the longship inches forward until its keel finally touches the gentle waves of the fjord. For a moment, everyone grows quiet. The ship settles into the water almost as naturally as a swan. It rocks gently. The overlapping planks hold firm. No leaks appear. The builders exchange satisfied smiles. Months of careful work have become something alive. Several oars are lowered into place. Young men climb aboard while experienced sailors watch from shore. The first strokes are slow. The vessel glides forward with surprising ease, leaving only a delicate wake behind it. Its long, narrow shape slips across the calm water almost silently. Watching it move, you suddenly understand why these ships changed the history of Northern Europe. They are not remarkable because they carried raiders. They are remarkable because they connected people. They carried fishermen to richer waters, families to new settlements, merchants to distant markets, messengers between communities, explorers toward unfamiliar coastlines. Without ships like this, the scattered farms along these fjords would remain isolated from one another and from the wider world. As evening settles across the shoreline, the new longship is pulled gently back onto land for a few final adjustments before its first true voyage. The builders gather their tools. The scent of fresh timber and warm tar lingers in the cooling air. Above the mountains, clouds begin glowing with the soft colors of sunset while the fjord reflects the sky like polished glass. Tomorrow, your attention will turn away from wood and iron toward something less tangible but no less important. Around the evening hearth, in sacred groves, and beneath the vast northern sky, you will begin to understand the stories that shape the Norse view of the world, the tales of gods, giants, destiny, and the unseen threads believed to bind every life together. The morning dawns quietly beneath a sky of pale silver. A light mist drifts across the fjord, softening the outlines of the mountains until they seem to rise from clouds instead of earth. The sea is calm enough to reflect the dark pine standing along the shore, while somewhere in the forest, a cuckoo calls into the stillness. The sound echoes gently through the valley before fading into silence once more. The farm wakes as it always does. The sheep are fed. The goats are milked. Water is carried from the spring. Bread is placed beside the hearth to warm. Nothing about this morning seems unusual. And yet, woven through these ordinary moments is something you have only begun to notice. The people around you do not separate daily life from their beliefs. For them, the world is alive. Every forest, river, mountain, and storm seems connected to stories passed from one generation to the next. These stories are not recited every hour, nor do they dominate every conversation. Instead, they exist quietly in the background, like the familiar rhythm of waves against the shore. You first notice it when dark clouds gather unexpectedly above the western mountains. An older man pauses while repairing a wooden rake. He glances toward the distant rumble of thunder and smiles softly. "Thor is riding today," he says. No one laughs. No one argues. The words are spoken as naturally as someone commenting on the changing weather. Whether the storm truly belongs to Thor matters less than the comfort found in seeing the world as part of a larger story. The thunder rolls again, deeper this time, and somewhere beyond the hills rain begins to fall. As you continue your chores, you begin asking quiet questions. Not as a scholar seeking perfect answers, but as someone hoping to understand the people among whom you now live. The first stories you hear are about Thor. Among ordinary farming families, he is perhaps the most familiar of the gods. Thor protects both people and the lands they cultivate. His mighty hammer, Mjolnir, is said to strike down dangerous giants while also blessing marriages, homes, and harvests. Many people wear small hammer-shaped pendants around their necks. Some are carved from bone. Others are cast in bronze or silver. The pendants are modest in size but deeply meaningful, serving as quiet reminders of protection and belonging. Later that morning, you accompany the family into a nearby grove of ancient trees. The forest floor is soft beneath your boots, covered with moss and fallen needles that release a rich scent whenever disturbed. Sunlight filters through the branches in scattered beams, illuminating patches of ferns and wildflowers growing between weathered stones. Eventually, the path opens into a small clearing. No grand temple stands here. No towering columns or marble statues greet you. Instead, there is only a circle of old trees surrounding a large boulder darkened by age. Nearby, someone has placed fresh flowers. A small wooden bowl rests upon the stone. Its simple appearance reveals little, yet everyone grows noticeably quieter. This is a sacred place. Across Scandinavia, worship often happens outdoors. Sacred groves, springs, unusual rock formations, and quiet hillsides become places where people feel especially close to the gods and the unseen forces shaping the world. Some larger communities possess dedicated temples, but many families continue offering gifts beneath open skies, where forests and mountains already seem filled with quiet presence. One member of the household pours a little ale into the earth beside the stone. Another leaves several pieces of fresh bread. These are not extravagant sacrifices. They are simple expressions of gratitude and hope. A request for good weather. Healthy livestock. Safe journeys. Strong harvests. The offerings are small because the family itself possesses only modest means. Faith here grows from everyday life rather than displays of wealth. Walking back toward the farm, you hear children repeating familiar stories they learned from their grandparents. Their favorite concerns Odin. Unlike mighty Thor, Odin is often described as thoughtful, restless, and endlessly curious. He sacrificed one of his eyes in exchange for wisdom. He wandered far from home seeking hidden knowledge. His two ravens, Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, fly across the world each day before returning to whisper everything they have seen. The children eagerly point toward a raven circling high above the valley. For a moment, they wonder aloud whether it might be one of Odin's faithful companions. The adults smile but say nothing. Some mysteries are more enjoyable when left unanswered. You notice that wisdom holds great value among the Norse. Strength earns respect. Skill earns admiration. But wisdom guides both. The oldest members of the village are listened to carefully, not because they are always right, but because they remember winters others have forgotten. They know where floods once reached. When certain berries ripen. How storms change the sea. Practical knowledge and sacred stories strengthen one another. Both help people survive. During the afternoon, you sit beside a craftsman carving runes into a smooth piece of ashwood. His knife moves slowly, cutting straight lines that intersect with quiet precision. Unlike the flowing letters that later alphabets will use, runes consist mostly of simple angles. They are easier to carve into wood, bone, or stone. He explains that runes serve many purposes. Some mark ownership. Others remember the dead. Some carry short messages. Occasionally, people believe they hold protective or symbolic power. Each carved line demands care. Mistakes cannot easily be erased. Watching him work, you realize how deeply words are respected. Whether spoken beside the fire or carved into stone, they possess lasting importance. As evening approaches, the family gathers once more inside the longhouse. Outside, rain begins falling gently upon the turf roof. Inside, the hearth casts warm light across familiar faces. Tonight, one of the elders begins telling the story of Yggdrasil, the great ash tree believed to stand at the center of existence. Its branches stretch into the heavens. Its roots reach deep beneath the earth. Upon its limbs perch birds. Creatures move along its trunk. Far below, hidden springs nourish its roots. Around it exist many different worlds. The realm of the gods. The lands of giants. The home of humans. Places of fire, ice, mist, and the honored dead. The children listen with quiet fascination. The adults know the tale well, yet they listen just as carefully. Not because every detail must be believed exactly as spoken, but because these stories remind everyone of their place within a much larger universe. You notice that the stories rarely promise perfect safety. Even the gods face hardship. They struggle. They make difficult choices. They know that one day Ragnarok, the final great conflict, will come. Yet despite this knowledge, they continue fulfilling their duties. There is something deeply comforting in that idea. Life remains meaningful not because it lasts forever, but because each day offers opportunities for courage, kindness, and honest work. Outside, the rain stops. The clouds slowly part. One by one, stars appear above the dark mountains. The Milky Way stretches across the northern sky like a pale river flowing through the heavens. The same stars guide fishermen returning home after sunset. The same stars help sailors cross unknown seas. The same stars have watched generations tell these stories beside countless fires. You step outside for a moment before sleep. The air is cool and carries the scent of wet pine and salt water. Far across the fjord, another family's hearth glows faintly through the darkness. Somewhere, an owl calls. A raven settles silently into the branches of an old spruce. The world feels vast, peaceful, and quietly mysterious. Tomorrow, those beliefs will be woven into one of the happiest times of the year. As the seasons continue their steady turning, the community will gather not to settle disputes or trade goods, but to celebrate together with feasts, music, shared labor, and traditions that mark the passing of another precious year beneath the northern sky. Summer has settled gently across the valley. You wake to a long stream of golden light spilling through the narrow opening in the longhouse wall. The sun has already climbed above the eastern ridge, and yet it feels as though the day has only just begun. In this northern land, daylight lingers for astonishing hours. The darkness that once wrapped itself around the farm through winter now retreats almost reluctantly, leaving behind bright evenings that seem to stretch forever. Outside, the world is alive. The fields shimmer beneath a light breeze, their barley heads slowly ripening into shades of pale gold. Wildflowers bloom along the stone paths between farms, filling the air with the soft fragrance of clover, meadowsweet, and buttercups. Bees drift lazily from blossom to blossom, while swallows dart above the water, chasing insects that dance in the warm morning light. The long winter feels wonderfully distant. But no one mistakes summer for a season of idleness. There is still hay to cut, fences to mend, boats to repair, and fields to watch carefully. Yet woven among these daily responsibilities are moments set aside for something equally important. Celebration. Life in Viking-age Scandinavia follows the rhythm of the seasons. The changing year is not measured only by the weather or the growth of crops but by gatherings that bring families and neighbors together. These occasions strengthen friendships, renew old promises, and remind everyone that survival is not simply about enduring hardship. It is also about sharing joy whenever the land allows. Today, preparations begin before breakfast. Children gather wildflowers from the meadows. Young branches of birch are cut and placed beside the entrances of several longhouses, filling the village with the fresh scent of green leaves. Women carry baskets of herbs into the kitchens, while men return from nearby forests with armfuls of firewood for the evening feast. Every household contributes something. One family brings fresh butter. Another offers smoked salmon. Someone else arrives carrying a barrel of ale brewed months earlier. The celebration belongs to everyone. No single household could provide enough on its own. As the morning passes, you help prepare the feast. Large pots hang above the hearth, where thick stews slowly simmer with barley, onions, cabbage, and pieces of lamb. Fresh fish caught only hours before are cleaned beside the shore before being roasted over glowing coals. Flat loaves of barley bread bake on heated stones, filling the longhouse with the comforting aroma of warm grain. Nearby, soft wheels of goat's cheese are arranged upon carved wooden boards. Bowls overflow with fresh berries gathered from the forest. Honey, carefully collected from wild bees earlier in the season, is saved for special occasions such as this. The meal remains simple by later standards. Yet compared with the ordinary suppers of daily life, it feels abundant. Not because there is endless food. Because everyone shares what they have. As afternoon approaches, visitors begin arriving from neighboring farms. Some travel by foot along winding forest paths. Others guide small boats quietly across the shining fjord. Children run ahead of their parents, eager to greet familiar friends they may not have seen since the last gathering. Dogs bark excitedly before settling once they recognize the newcomers. The village slowly fills with cheerful voices. No one seems in a hurry. The work of preparing the feast blends naturally into conversation. An elderly woman admires a baby's first attempts at walking. Two fishermen compare the size of this year's herring shoals. A blacksmith examines a newly repaired axe brought by one of his neighbors. The festival begins long before the first meal is served. Simply gathering together is part of the celebration. As evening draws nearer, benches are carried outside. The weather is warm enough to enjoy the long northern twilight beneath the open sky. Smoke rises gently from cooking fires, carrying with it the rich scent of roasting meat and fresh bread. The fjord reflects the golden light so perfectly that it seems almost impossible to tell where water ends and sky begins. When the food is finally ready, everyone gathers without formal ceremony. Children are served first. Then the elders. Wooden bowls and cups pass steadily from hand to hand. No one eats quickly. Meals during festivals are meant to be enjoyed slowly. Conversation flows as freely as the ale. You taste fresh butter spread across warm bread. Tender fish seasoned only with herbs and salt. Creamy cheese paired with sweet berries. The flavors are modest but deeply satisfying, shaped entirely by the land surrounding you. Nearby, someone begins playing a simple wooden flute. Another joins with a small lyre whose quiet notes drift softly through the evening air. The music is gentle rather than grand. Its melodies rise and fall like the waves along the shore. Before long, several children begin dancing together across the grass, laughing as they invent their own steps beneath the fading sunlight. Soon the adults join them. Not everyone dances with perfect grace. That hardly matters. The purpose is not performance. It is participation. Even those who remain seated clap softly in rhythm or smile as younger generations fill the meadow with joyful movement. Later, as the sun finally slips behind the mountains without bringing complete darkness, storytelling begins. An elder rises slowly from his bench. The conversations fade. Even the children grow quiet. He does not tell tales of endless battles. Instead, he recalls the first family known to settle this valley many generations ago. He speaks of difficult winters survived through cooperation. Of floods that changed the course of the river. Of summers so warm that barley grew taller than anyone could remember. The story belongs to everyone listening. It reminds them that they are part of a chain stretching far into the past. One day, they too will become ancestors remembered around another fire. As the evening deepens, a small offering is quietly made. A cup of ale is poured onto the earth beside an ancient oak standing at the edge of the meadow. Several people bow their heads briefly. No elaborate ceremony follows. The gesture is simple. A quiet expression of gratitude for the harvest already growing in the fields and a hope that the coming months will remain kind. The sacred and the ordinary exist comfortably together. There is no clear boundary between them. The meal. The music. The stories. The offering. Each forms part of the same shared experience. Looking around, you begin to understand why these gatherings matter so deeply. The work of survival often demands long days of physical labor. Storms arrive without warning. Illness can change a family's fortunes overnight. Winter always waits beyond the horizon. Without moments like these, life would become nothing but endless preparation for hardship. Instead, the festivals remind everyone why that work is worthwhile. Not simply to survive, but to live together. As darkness finally settles, though never becoming completely black during these summer weeks, the stars begin appearing one by one above the fjord. Children fall asleep beneath woolen blankets while conversations continue quietly around the fading fires. Someone softly hums the melody played earlier upon the flute. The sound drifts across the still water before disappearing into the night. Tomorrow, another kind of gathering will begin. Not a feast beneath familiar skies, but the careful loading of supplies onto a waiting ship. For while many people spend their lives close to home, others must leave the safety of these peaceful shores behind, trusting wind, stars, and the strength of a wooden hull as they set sail across the vast waters of the North Sea. A cool breeze wakes you before the fire has fully stirred to life. The longhouse is unusually quiet. Those remaining at home still sleep beneath their woolen blankets, but outside, the shoreline is already alive with careful preparation. You pull on your cloak and step into the pale light of dawn. The air carries the familiar scent of salt, wet rope, pine tar, and seaweed drying on smooth stones. The fjord lies almost perfectly still. Its calm surface reflects the mountains with such clarity that they appear to continue beneath the water. Thin wisps of mist drift slowly across the inlet, parting gently as a pair of ducks glide toward the reeds. Somewhere farther out, a gull cries into the morning, its voice echoing from one rocky cliff to another. Today, you will leave the shelter of the fjord. Not forever. Only for a voyage across the North Sea with a group of merchants carrying goods to another shore. Most people in Viking-age Scandinavia never make such a journey. Many spend their entire lives within a day's walk or sail of the farm where they were born. Yet enough sailors, traders, and fishermen cross these waters that the sea has become as familiar to them as the forest paths are to the shepherd. Down on the beach, the longship rests where it was pulled ashore after its final repairs. Without its dragon head mounted upon the prow, it appears less intimidating than graceful. The long hull curves gently from bow to stern, its overlapping oak planks catching the soft golden light of sunrise. A light coating of dew glistens upon the wood before slowly disappearing as the day warms. The crew moves with quiet confidence. No one wastes energy. No one hurries. Each person already knows what must be done. Barrels of dried fish are rolled carefully aboard. Bundles of wool are stacked beneath leather coverings to protect them from sea spray. Small chests containing iron tools, carved wooden bowls, and pieces of worked amber are secured with thick rope. Fresh water is stored in sturdy casks. Simple food, barley bread, smoked meat, hard cheese, and dried berries, is packed where it can easily be reached during the journey. Every item has its place. A poorly balanced ship becomes harder to steer and more dangerous when rough weather arrives. Before launching, the crew walks slowly around the vessel one final time. A sailor presses his thumb against the seams where pine tar seals the planks. Another tests each oarlock. The mast is examined. The sail inspected for loose stitching. Nothing is left to chance. The sea is patient. It quietly notices every mistake. With a shared effort, the ship begins to move. Thick wooden rollers are placed beneath the keel, and dozens of hands push steadily together. The hull inches forward until cool water embraces its sides. For a brief moment, the vessel rocks gently before floating free. The sound is almost musical. The sound is almost musical. Water touches wood. Ropes creak softly. Oars settle into their places. One by one, the crew climbs aboard. You take a seat upon a smooth wooden bench. The space is modest. There are no private cabins. No comfortable beds. No sheltered dining room. Everything aboard the ship serves more than one purpose. The benches become seats while rowing. At night, they become sleeping places. The open deck carries cargo, passengers, and supplies alike. A call passes quietly down the length of the vessel. The first oars dip into the water together. Splash. Pull. Lift. Again. The rhythm is steady rather than hurried. Soon the familiar shoreline begins to drift behind you. The farm grows smaller. The long houses become tiny dark shapes beneath the green hillside. Thin columns of smoke rise peacefully into the morning sky. Before long, the fjord opens into the vast waters beyond. The North Sea stretches toward every horizon. Its surface is no longer sheltered by towering mountains. Gentle swells lift the ship before lowering it again with slow, patient motion. The movement feels strange at first, yet your body gradually begins to follow the sea's rhythm. Above you, the square woolen sail is raised. The wind catches it almost immediately. The cloth tightens with a deep, satisfying sound. The oars are lifted aboard. Now the sea itself becomes your quiet companion, carrying the ship westward. You soon understand why Viking ships were so admired. They move with remarkable grace. Rather than fighting each wave, the flexible hull rises and falls naturally, almost seeming to dance across the water. Even when the breeze freshens, the vessel remains surprisingly steady. Hours pass beneath an endless sky. The shoreline eventually fades into a faint blue line behind you. Now there is only sea. Water below. Clouds above. The wind hums softly through the rigging while the sail snaps gently whenever it catches a stronger gust. Navigation requires constant attention. There are no maps spread across polished tables. No magnetic compasses. Instead, the experienced sailors observe everything around them. They study the position of the sun, the direction of the wind, the movement of waves, the flight of seabirds. Even the color of the water offers clues. A change from deep blue to green may suggest shallower coastal waters still hidden beyond the horizon. Clouds gathering in unusual formations can hint at distant land. Knowledge lives in careful observation. The older sailors rarely explain every decision aloud. They simply know. Years spent crossing these waters have taught them lessons no written guide could fully capture. By midday, a small pod of dolphins appears beside the ship. They leap effortlessly through the waves, keeping pace for several minutes before disappearing into the glittering sea. The crew smiles quietly. Some believe such encounters bring good fortune. Whether that is true hardly matters. The sight lifts everyone's spirits. Later, seabirds begin circling overhead. One sailor points toward them. "Land tomorrow," he says with calm confidence. The birds rarely venture too far from their nesting places. Long before human eyes can see a distant coast, the birds often reveal its presence. As afternoon fades, the wind grows stronger. Dark clouds gather along the northern horizon. The sea changes almost imperceptibly at first. The gentle swells become taller. White foam appears upon their crests. The sail is quickly reefed, reducing its size before the weather worsens. Nobody panics. The crew has done this many times before. Commands remain calm. Each sailor moves with practiced efficiency. The ship begins climbing larger waves before sliding smoothly down the other side. Spray washes across the deck, cold and salty against your face. The smell of wet wool, tar, and seawater fills the air. For a while, conversation disappears. Everyone simply works. Then, almost as suddenly as it arrived, the squall passes. Sunlight breaks through scattered clouds. A rainbow briefly arches across the eastern sky before fading into mist. The sea settles once more. The crew resumes eating their simple evening meal. Barley bread. Dried fish. A little cheese. Fresh water shared carefully from wooden cups. There is no fire aboard. No hot supper. Only quiet satisfaction that another day has passed safely. As darkness slowly approaches, the sail is lowered. The ship drifts more gently beneath a sky filled with stars. The familiar constellations emerge one by one. Experienced sailors glance upward as naturally as farmers study their fields. The stars become companions. Silent guides leading them across immense distances. You lie back upon the wooden deck, wrapped tightly in your cloak. The sea rocks the ship with slow, comforting motion. Above, the Milky Way stretches from one horizon to the other, brighter than you have ever seen it from land. There is something humbling about this journey. You realize that the Vikings did not conquer the sea. No one truly does. They learned to listen to it. To respect it. To travel with it rather than against it. That quiet understanding carried them farther than strength alone ever could. Somewhere beyond the darkness ahead lies another shore, where unfamiliar languages, different customs, and new opportunities await. Tomorrow, you will step into a wider world and discover that the people of Scandinavia were never as isolated as their rugged homeland might first suggest. You wake not to the familiar cry of gulls echoing between the cliffs of your home fjord, but to a different chorus of seabirds wheeling above an unfamiliar coast. The sea is calm once more. The storm that passed during the previous afternoon has disappeared beyond the horizon, leaving behind a clear morning washed in pale gold. Gentle swells rock the longship as the first sunlight spreads across the water, turning every ripple into shimmering bands of silver. Someone points toward the western horizon. At first you see nothing. Then, slowly, a dark line begins to separate itself from the sky. Land. Not the steep mountains of Scandinavia, but lower hills softened by green fields and scattered forests. As the ship draws nearer, small farms become visible along the coastline. Thin streams of smoke rise from rooftops much like those at home, reminding you that ordinary people live here as well, tending animals, planting crops, and preparing breakfast beside their own hearths. The world beyond Scandinavia is both unfamiliar and surprisingly familiar. Everywhere people must eat. Everywhere children grow. Everywhere families work to survive another winter. The details differ, but the rhythm of life often remains the same. The longship glides into a sheltered harbor already busy with activity. Fishing boats rest beside larger merchant vessels whose designs are unlike your own. Some have taller sides built to carry heavier cargo. Others possess broad, rounded hulls more suited to calmer waters. Languages you do not recognize drift across the docks in cheerful conversation, mixing with the creaking of ropes and the gentle knocking of wooden hulls against weathered piers. The harbor smells wonderfully alive. Salt hangs in the air alongside the scent of fresh bread baking somewhere nearby. Tar, wet rope, smoked fish, damp timber, and wood smoke blend into an aroma that seems to belong to every busy port in the world. The crew begins unloading the cargo. Barrels of dried cod. Bundles of wool. Animal furs gathered during the long northern winter. Carved wooden bowls. Iron tools forged in Scandinavian workshops. Nothing here is especially luxurious. These are practical goods made with patience and skill, valued because they solve everyday problems. Soon merchants from the town arrive to inspect them. Trade begins not with hurried bargaining but with conversation. Old acquaintances greet one another warmly. Some have met many times over the years, their friendships stretching across the sea just as reliably as the trade routes themselves. Business grows from trust. A handshake. A shared meal. A promise remembered from the previous season. Silver may complete the exchange, but reputation makes it possible. While the traders negotiate, you wander carefully through the marketplace. It is larger than any gathering you have yet experienced. Stalls line narrow streets, each displaying objects that seem almost magical simply because they come from so far away. Bright glass beads shimmer in the morning sun. Their colors, deep blue, emerald green, rich amber, catch your attention immediately. Unlike carved wood or polished bone, glass seems to hold light within itself. Nearby, a merchant carefully unfolds fine cloth woven so smoothly that it feels almost impossible beneath your fingertips. Its patterns are unlike anything produced on the looms back home. You pass baskets filled with dried herbs whose scents you cannot name. Small jars of fragrant oils. Blocks of beeswax. Elegant bronze lamps. Each object has traveled its own remarkable journey before arriving here. One elderly trader smiles as he notices your curiosity. Patiently, he points toward several unfamiliar items resting upon his table. A piece of silk, lighter than wool yet astonishingly strong. A handful of spices carried from lands far beyond the Mediterranean. A tiny carved ivory figure whose smooth surface reflects careful craftsmanship. He explains, through gestures and a few shared words, that these treasures have crossed many hands before reaching this harbor. Some began their journey thousands of kilometers away. Perhaps in distant Asia. Perhaps somewhere south of the Great Deserts. No single traveler has seen every step of that journey. Trade is like a river. Each person carries its waters only part of the way. You suddenly realize that your quiet farm beside the fjord is connected to places its people will never visit. A silver coin might begin in the workshops of the Islamic world, pass through merchants traveling along eastern rivers, change hands in bustling Baltic ports, and finally purchase a sheep in a Norwegian valley. The world is much larger than you imagined. Yet it is also far more connected. Walking farther into the town, you notice differences in architecture. Some buildings are larger than the longhouses at home. Others are built from stone instead of timber. Church bells ring softly in the distance, though their meaning is still unfamiliar to many Scandinavians during this period. Different beliefs live here. Different rulers. Different languages. And yet laughter sounds much the same. Children chase one another through narrow streets. Blacksmiths hammer glowing iron. Bakers pull warm loaves from their ovens. Life remains wonderfully ordinary. At the edge of the market, several Scandinavian merchants gather beneath the shade of a wooden shelter. One speaks of journeys eastward through great rivers that eventually reach lands filled with enormous cities. Another recalls sailing south to markets where olive trees cover the hillsides instead of pine forests. A younger sailor dreams aloud of Iceland, where new farms continue to be established upon distant volcanic shores. The conversations remind you that exploration rarely begins with conquest. More often, it begins with curiosity. Where does this river lead? What lies beyond the next headland? Could better farmland exist across the sea? Are there people willing to trade for our wool, our iron, our fish? These simple questions gradually reshape maps. Later in the afternoon, your own crew prepares for the return voyage. The cargo has changed. The barrels once filled with dried fish have been replaced by sacks of grain, carefully measured silver, glass beads, whetstones, and several bundles of cloth impossible to weave at home. Every object will eventually find its place within Scandinavian households. Some become treasured family possessions. Others will be traded again at the next thing or seasonal market. Nothing remains still for long. The tide itself reminds you of that. As the ship leaves the harbor, you glance back toward the busy waterfront. Within moments, the sounds of the marketplace begin fading behind the steady rhythm of waves. The coastline slowly shrinks into the distance. Soon only green hills remain visible. Then even they disappear beyond the curve of the earth. The sea welcomes you once again. The crew settles into familiar routines. The sail fills with a gentle breeze. The ship points toward home. You spend much of the journey quietly reflecting. The stories told beside the hearth had spoken of distant lands. Now those places no longer feel imaginary. You have seen them. Not as mysterious kingdoms filled only with warriors and kings, but as homes where ordinary families wake each morning to work, laugh, trade, and care for one another. It changes the way you see your own world. The fjord where you live no longer feels like the edge of civilization. Instead, it becomes one quiet thread in a vast web stretching across seas, rivers, forests, and mountains. By the time the familiar peaks of Scandinavia appear once more on the horizon, the air has grown noticeably cooler. Autumn is approaching. The days are becoming shorter. The forests have begun showing the first hints of gold among their green leaves. The return home brings comfort, but also urgency. The generous warmth of summer is fading. Soon every household must turn its full attention toward preparing for the season that tests every family, every farm, and every carefully stored harvest. The long winter is coming. The first frost arrives almost unnoticed. One morning, as you step outside the longhouse before sunrise, the familiar path to the spring has turned white. Every blade of grass glitters beneath a thin layer of ice, and the wooden fence surrounding the sheep pen sparkles in the faint morning light. Your breath hangs in the still air before slowly drifting away. Somewhere across the fjord, a raven calls into the silence, its voice carrying farther than it did during the warm months of summer. Autumn has quietly surrendered to winter. The change is gradual, but no one is surprised. For weeks, the household has been preparing for this moment. The last bundles of barley have been stored safely inside the granary. Fishing boats have been pulled farther onto the shore, where winter storms cannot carry them away. Firewood has been stacked beneath sturdy shelters until neat rows of split logs stand taller than a person. Hay fills the loft above the livestock, its sweet, dry scent drifting through the cold air each time the doors are opened. Every task completed during the past seasons has been leading toward this single goal: to endure. You begin to understand that winter is not an unexpected hardship in Scandinavia. It is an expected guest. One that arrives faithfully every year. The families who survive are not the ones who fight against it. They are the ones who greet it with careful preparation. Inside the longhouse, the rhythm of life changes. The days grow shorter until darkness lingers long after breakfast and returns well before supper. During the deepest weeks of winter, the sun barely climbs above the southern horizon before beginning its slow descent once again. Its light is soft and golden, casting long blue shadows across the snow-covered valley. The world seems quieter. Snow absorbs sound, leaving the landscape wrapped in a gentle stillness. Even the waves upon the fjord appear calmer beneath the pale winter sky. The fields that demanded constant labor only a few months ago now rest beneath an unbroken blanket of white. There is little to do outside except care for the animals and clear fresh snowfall from paths between the buildings. The sheep remain close together inside their shelter. Their thick wool protects them from the bitter cold, but they still depend entirely upon the hay gathered during summer. Each armful carried into the pen reminds you how precious every sunny day of haymaking truly was. The goats receive careful attention as well. Water must be carried to them after ice forms across the surface of nearby streams. Their health is watched closely. Losing an animal now would mean losing milk when spring finally returns. Nothing can be replaced quickly during winter. Everything becomes more valuable. The chickens remain near the warmth of the longhouse, scratching patiently through straw spread across the floor. Even they seem quieter. The entire farm moves at a slower pace, conserving both energy and supplies. Your own clothing grows heavier. Several layers of wool wrap around your body before you step outdoors each morning. A thick cloak fastened with a bronze brooch shields you from the wind. Leather boots lined with fur keep your feet warm while crossing frozen ground. Mittens made from sheep's wool soften the bite of icy air. Every garment has been carefully woven, sewn, and repaired through many winters. Nothing is worn carelessly. Warmth itself has become a treasured possession. One afternoon, gentle snow begins falling. At first, only a few flakes drift lazily through the air. Then the sky fills with countless white crystals moving almost silently toward the earth. The mountains disappear behind a curtain of snow. The forest grows wonderfully still. Even the sheep seem content to watch from the doorway of their shelter. You pause for a moment simply to observe. There is great beauty in winter. The branches of every pine tree bend beneath soft white blankets. Icicles form along the edges of the roof, catching what little sunlight remains. The fjord reflects the grey sky like polished steel. The world appears peaceful. Yet beauty alone cannot keep a family alive. Every meal now comes from careful planning. Barrels of dried fish are opened. Smoked meat hangs from beams inside the longhouse. Hard wheels of cheese, prepared months earlier, are sliced sparingly. Barley stored since autumn becomes warm porridge beside the fire each morning. The vegetables gathered from summer gardens, cabbage, onions, beans, and peas, have been preserved as carefully as possible. Fresh food grows increasingly rare. The family eats with quiet gratitude. Every bite reminds them of work completed long before the snow arrived. Winter teaches patience. There are no shortcuts. You cannot hurry the return of spring. Instead, the longhouse becomes the center of life once more. The hearth burns almost constantly. Someone always watches the fire. Children play with carved wooden animals upon the floor while older family members spin wool, weave cloth, mend clothing, and repair tools that will be needed once warmer weather returns. You spend long evenings carving new handles for farming tools, smoothing rough wood until it fits comfortably in your hand. Nearby, another family member twists fresh rope from plant fibers gathered during summer. Across the room, an elder carefully repairs a fishing net by firelight. The work is quiet, steady, almost meditative. Outside, winter limits what can be done. Inside, winter provides time to prepare for the future. Storytelling becomes even more important during these long nights. As darkness settles well before evening, everyone gathers closer to the hearth. The fire crackles softly. Shadows dance upon the timber walls. Someone begins telling a familiar saga, not to escape the season, but to accompany it. The stories pass the hours while also carrying history, wisdom, and laughter from one generation to the next. Children listen with wide eyes. Adults smile at lines they have heard dozens of times before. No one seems to grow tired of hearing them again. One evening, the wind rises suddenly. It rushes down from the mountains with surprising force, rattling the wooden walls and sending snow swirling against the roof. Outside, the storm howls through the darkness. The world beyond the doorway disappears completely. No one even considers traveling tonight. Instead, another log is placed upon the fire. The family moves a little closer together. The longhouse creaks softly, but it has weathered storms like this for decades. Perhaps longer. You begin to appreciate the remarkable confidence these people place in their homes. The walls are not luxurious. The roof sometimes leaks. Smoke occasionally fills the room. Yet the house stands firm against a landscape capable of astonishing power. Morning arrives after the storm with brilliant sunlight. The snow now lies much deeper than before. Every familiar path has vanished beneath smooth white drifts. The fences appear only as gentle lines crossing the valley. Children laugh as they help clear the doorway with wooden shovels, their cheerful voices breaking the stillness. Even difficult seasons contain moments of simple happiness. As the weeks continue, the nights slowly begin growing shorter. Almost imperceptibly, daylight returns. The family notices small signs before anyone speaks of them. The sun lingers a little longer above the mountains. Icicles drip during midday. A raven begins calling earlier each morning. The seasons are turning once again. But winter has not yet finished testing the valley. Cold and hunger are not its only challenges. Even in a household that has prepared carefully, there remains another quiet danger that no amount of stored grain or stacked firewood can fully prevent. Soon you will discover how fragile life can be when illness arrives in a world without modern medicine. By the middle of winter, you have grown accustomed to the quiet rhythm of the season. The snow still blankets the valley, and each morning begins with the familiar crackle of the hearth being coaxed back into bright flame. Outside, the fjord lies beneath a pale sky, its shoreline edged with thin sheets of ice that shimmer whenever the low sun appears. The world feels calm, almost suspended in time. Yet winter carries dangers that cannot be seen from the doorway. Not every hardship arrives with a storm. Some enter the longhouse as silently as the cold itself. One morning, you notice that one of the younger children has not risen with the others. Usually the child is among the first awake, eager to help scatter grain for the chickens or carry kindling to the fire. Today, there is only quiet breathing beneath a thick woolen blanket. A hand is placed gently upon the child's forehead. The room grows still. The skin feels unusually warm. A fever has come. No one panics. Illness is a familiar visitor in Viking-age Scandinavia. Every family has seen it before. Sometimes it passes after a few days. Sometimes it does not. The uncertainty is perhaps the hardest part. Without understanding invisible germs or bacteria, people explain sickness through observation, tradition, and generations of experience. They may not know the hidden causes, but they recognize many of its patterns remarkably well. The child is moved closer to the fire. Fresh water is warmed. A soft blanket is folded beneath the head. The household continues its work, but more quietly than usual. Someone must still feed the sheep. The goats still need water. The fire must still be tended. Life cannot completely stop. Yet everyone checks upon the child whenever they pass. Care itself becomes another daily task. An elderly woman, respected for her knowledge of herbs, opens a small wooden chest kept carefully beneath one of the benches. Inside are tiny cloth bundles gathered during warmer seasons. Dried yarrow, chamomile, juniper berries, meadowsweet, angelica root. Plants collected months ago now become precious once again. She prepares a warm infusion, allowing fragrant steam to rise gently into the room. The aroma is earthy, floral, and comforting. Whether every remedy truly heals is impossible to know. Some herbs genuinely ease pain or reduce inflammation. Others offer comfort more than cure. But none are prepared carelessly. Every plant has been gathered because someone, somewhere, believed it useful. Knowledge passes through memory rather than books. Each generation adds its own observations. You sit quietly beside the hearth as snow continues falling outside. The child sleeps for much of the day, occasionally waking to sip warm broth before drifting back into dreams. The adult speaks softly. There is hope. But there is also realism. In this world, even a simple illness may become dangerous. Throughout the winter, injuries are another constant concern. A sharp axe can slip while splitting frozen timber. A fisherman may fall upon icy rocks beside the shore. A knife may cut deeper than expected while preparing food. Without antibiotics, even small wounds demand careful attention. You remember watching the blacksmith scrape rust from a blade several weeks earlier. He inspected every tool carefully, not only because sharp iron works better, but because clean tools are less likely to leave dangerous wounds. Though people do not yet understand microscopic infection, experience has taught them that some injuries heal cleanly while others become swollen, painful, and deadly. Clean water is valued. Fresh cloth is used whenever possible. Honey is sometimes placed upon wounds, both to protect them and because generations have noticed that it often helps healing. Much of this knowledge comes through patient observation rather than scientific explanation. One afternoon, an older farmer visits the longhouse. His hand is wrapped carefully in clean linen after being injured while repairing a sled. He accepts a fresh bandage and quietly thanks the family before returning home. No payment is requested. The kindness will almost certainly be returned another day. Illness rarely affects only one household. Communities survive by helping one another through difficult seasons. The same spirit that raised barns together now carries bowls of warm stew to neighbors too weak to cook for themselves. You begin to notice that care is shared. Not only among relatives, but throughout the village. As evening falls, the elder begins telling stories once more. This time, however, they are not tales of distant voyages. Instead, she remembers the village healer who lived when she herself was a child. The woman had known where the first spring flowers appeared after winter. Which tree bark eased fever? Which moss helped slow bleeding? She had delivered babies, comforted the dying, and welcomed new life into the world with the same calm hands. Listening carefully, you realize that healers hold a special place within Norse communities. They combine practical knowledge with tradition. Sometimes prayers accompany treatment. Sometimes quiet songs. Sometimes simply a reassuring presence beside the patient. Healing is never separated entirely from compassion. A few days pass. The child's fever slowly begins to ease. Color returns to tired cheeks. The first request for food brings quiet smiles throughout the household. No celebration follows. Only relief. Everyone knows another illness may come another winter. No victory is permanent. Birth carries similar uncertainty. Later in the evening, conversation turns toward a neighboring family expecting a child when spring arrives. Excitement mixes naturally with concern. Childbirth is one of life's greatest joys. It is also among its greatest dangers. Many mothers survive. Some do not. Many infants grow into healthy children. Others live only briefly. These realities are accepted with quiet sadness rather than bitterness. Life is treasured precisely because it is fragile. As the weeks continue, you begin noticing older members of the community moving more slowly. An aching knee stiffened by the cold. A shoulder that no longer lifts heavy timber. Eyes that struggle in the dim firelight. Age itself becomes another condition no healer can prevent. Yet elders remain deeply respected. Their strength now lies in memory. They remember storms others have forgotten. Famine survived decades earlier. Old boundary lines. Family histories. Songs. Recipes. Stories. The community protects them just as they once protected everyone else. Toward the end of winter, you walk briefly outside before sunrise. The air is bitterly cold, but wonderfully clear. Above you, countless stars shine across the dark sky. Snow crunches softly beneath your boots. The valley sleeps peacefully. Other simple axes used only yesterday for chopping firewood. Few possess elaborate armor. Most are ordinary farmers first. If they must defend their homes, they will do so with the tools available. You notice something important. No one speaks eagerly of battle. There is no excitement. Only quiet determination. These people understand what is truly at stake. Not glory. Their homes. Their families. Their harvest. The life they have patiently built through years of work. The approaching ships gradually become clearer. They are longships. Their sails filled by the gentle spring wind. Sunlight flashes against wet oars as they draw nearer. The entire village watches in silence. Then one elder smiles faintly. He recognizes the carved prow upon the leading vessel. The ships belong to neighboring communities returning from a trading voyage. Relief spreads almost invisibly across the gathered faces. Spears are lowered. Children are called back from the hills. Laughter replaces tension. For today, the danger existed only in possibility. The visitors land peacefully. Their cargo includes grain, iron, and several barrels of salt unavailable locally. Warm greetings follow. News is exchanged. Meals are shared. The village returns quickly to its ordinary rhythm. Yet that brief moment remains in your thoughts. You realize how easily uncertainty becomes woven into daily life. Even peaceful communities remain prepared because experience has taught them that safety can never be taken entirely for granted. Several evenings later, while sitting beside the hearth, an older sailor quietly tells a different story. Many years ago, before you arrived, another settlement farther along the coast was not so fortunate. Unknown ships entered the harbor shortly after sunrise. The villagers believed they were merchants. By the time the mistake became clear, it was too late. Buildings were burned. Food stores taken. You realize how easily uncertainty becomes woven into daily life. Even peaceful communities remain prepared because experience has taught them that safety can never be taken entirely for granted. Several evenings later, while sitting beside the hearth, an older sailor quietly tells a different story. Many years ago, before you arrived, another settlement farther along the coast was not so fortunate. Unknown ships entered the harbor shortly after sunrise. The villagers believed they were merchants. By the time the mistake became clear, it was too late. Buildings were burned. Food stores taken. Several families fled into the forests carrying only what they could lift. Others were captured. The storyteller speaks without anger. Only sadness. The memory has softened with time but never disappeared. You understand then that raiding was deeply personal for those who experienced it. It was not a grand historical event. It was the sudden loss of familiar places. The interruption of ordinary lives. For most people, the greatest fear was not dying in battle. It was watching everything carefully built over generations disappear within a single afternoon. The conversation eventually turns toward thralls. Earlier, you learned that slavery exists within Norse society. Now you begin to understand more fully how people become thralls. Some are born into slavery. Others become enslaved through debt or punishment. Many are captured during raids far from home. Their lives change forever through circumstances they could never control. Thralls work in households, fields, and workshops. Some eventually earn or receive freedom. Many never do. They remain an accepted yet deeply unequal part of Viking society. Around the fire, no one celebrates this reality. Neither does anyone question its existence. It is simply part of the world they know. Like harsh winters or dangerous seas. Listening quietly, you are reminded that every historical society contains both admirable strengths and painful injustices. The Vikings were no exception. The next morning, work resumes in the fields. The barley cannot wait for philosophical reflection. Seeds must enter the soil while spring rains continue. As you guide the wooden plow across the damp earth, birds follow behind, searching eagerly for insects uncovered by each furrow. The ordinary rhythm of farming quickly returns. There is comfort in that. Most days are not shaped by extraordinary events. They are shaped by repeated acts of patient labor. As the weeks pass, fresh grass covers the hillsides. Lambs race clumsily through the meadows. Fishing boats once again crowd the shoreline during calm mornings. Children laugh beside the stream while gathering smooth stones. Life proves remarkably resilient. Communities rebuild. Fields are replanted. Homes repaired. Memories remain, but so does hope. You begin to see why Viking society endured for centuries. Not because every generation escaped hardship, but because every generation learned how to begin again after hardship had passed. The true strength of these people lies not in the sword. It lies in endurance, in cooperation, in the quiet refusal to surrender to despair. As summer slowly approaches once more, you notice one elderly farmer sitting alone beside the edge of the field, watching younger hands complete work he once performed himself. His movements have become slower, his hair almost entirely grey. Yet every passerby pauses to greet him with respect. His greatest journeys now lie behind him. A different season of life has quietly begun. And soon, you will come to understand what it means to grow old in a world where every year survived is itself a remarkable achievement. Another summer has arrived. The valley is once again filled with the familiar sounds of sheep grazing along the hillsides, children laughing beside the stream, and fishing boats gliding quietly across the fjord before sunrise. Wildflowers sway gently in the warm breeze, and the long daylight stretches late into the evening, bathing the mountains in soft golden light. The land looks much as it did when you first awoke here many months ago. Yet you have changed. The work that once felt unfamiliar has become almost instinctive. Your hands know how to split firewood without wasting effort. You can recognize the smell of approaching rain carried on the sea wind. You understand when the sheep should be moved to fresh pasture and how to judge the weather by watching clouds gather above the distant peaks. You are beginning to belong. But as you grow more comfortable, you notice something else. The people who taught you these skills no longer move as quickly as they once did. One morning, before the rest of the household wakes, you find the oldest man on the farm already sitting outside upon a weathered wooden bench. He faces the fjord. The sun has only just risen above the eastern hills, painting the calm water with ribbons of gold. He says very little. Instead, he simply watches the fishing boats making their way toward deeper water. His hands rest quietly upon a walking stick carved from smooth ashwood. Those hands were once strong enough to fell towering pines, build longhouses, and row across rough seas for hours without rest. Now the fingers bend more slowly. The knuckles have grown broad and stiff after decades of labor. Every scar tells a story. A cut from a shipbuilder's axe. A burn from the blacksmith's forge. A bite from an anxious sheep. A broken finger that healed slightly crooked after a winter accident. The body remembers everything. Growing old in Viking-age Scandinavia is both a privilege and a challenge. Many people never reach advanced age. Illness. Childbirth. Accidents. Harsh winters. All claim lives long before old age arrives. Those who do live many decades earn quiet respect simply through experience. They have survived seasons that younger people know only through stories. They remember harvests that failed. Storms that reshaped the coastline. Winters so severe that the fjord remained frozen longer than anyone expected. Their memories become a living library. There are few written records to preserve local history. Instead, the oldest members of the community carry it within themselves. After breakfast, you accompany the elderly farmer into the nearby woodland. The walk is slow. Not because he has forgotten the path, but because every uneven stone requires careful footing. He pauses often. Sometimes to catch his breath. Sometimes simply to admire a flowering plant or listen to birds singing overhead. Age changes the pace of travel. It also changes what a person notices. Where younger feet hurry forward, older eyes linger. At the edge of the forest, he stops beside an enormous oak. Its trunk is so wide that 3 people together could barely reach around it. He places one weathered hand upon the rough bark. "My grandfather planted this," he says softly. You realize the tree has quietly measured the passing of generations. When it was a young sapling, the man standing beside you had not yet been born. Now both have grown old together. There is comfort in that thought. Back at the farm, younger family members perform the heavier work. Large stones are lifted from the fields. Hay is gathered beneath the hot afternoon sun. Boats are repaired before the coming autumn. The elders rarely lead these tasks anymore. Instead, they advise. They notice small mistakes before they become larger problems. A roof beam not properly supported. A fishing net tied with uneven knots. A patch of grain showing early signs of disease. Their knowledge saves effort long before strength becomes necessary. During the warmest part of the afternoon, several children gather around an elderly woman spinning wool outside the longhouse. Her spindle turns steadily between practice fingers. The movement appears almost effortless. As she works, she teaches without ever calling it a lesson. She explains which sheep produce the softest fleece. How to wash wool without damaging its fibers. Why certain plants create yellow dye while others produce shades of brown or green. The children listen carefully. Occasionally they ask questions. More often they simply watch. Learning happens through shared work rather than formal instruction. The skills needed for survival pass naturally from old hands to young ones. As evening approaches, you help repair one of the smaller fishing boats pulled onto the beach. The elderly fisherman who once owned it no longer rows far into the fjord. His shoulders tire too quickly. His eyesight fades as daylight weakens. Yet he still examines every plank with remarkable precision. His fingertips detect roughness invisible to younger eyes. He remembers exactly where the hull leaked during a storm 20 years earlier. Experience often compensates for fading strength. Watching him work, you begin to understand that usefulness does not disappear with age. It changes shape. That evening, the household gathers outside rather than inside the longhouse. The air remains warm. The western sky glows orange long after the sun has disappeared beyond the mountains. Someone prepares fresh trout over a small fire. Children chase one another across the meadow while sheep graze peacefully nearby. The oldest members of the family sit together upon low benches. They speak quietly of people no longer living. Parents. Friends. Neighbors. Some died during harsh winters. Others during voyages from which they never returned. A few simply grew old enough that their bodies finally grew tired. Death is never spoken of dramatically. It is accepted as the final season of every life. One elder explains that the greatest hope is not necessarily to become famous. It is to be remembered kindly. To leave behind healthy children. Well-kept fields. Strong friendships. A good reputation. These are the true measures of a life well lived. Honor, once again, reveals itself not as glory in battle but as quiet reliability. You think back across the year you have spent here. You remember learning to milk goats on chilly spring mornings. Harvesting barley beneath the summer sun. Watching longships slide gracefully across the sea. Listening to stories beside the winter fire. Every lesson has come from ordinary people rather than legendary heroes. Perhaps that is the greatest surprise of all. History often shines its brightest light upon kings, warriors, and explorers. Yet entire civilizations are sustained by farmers who rise before dawn. By mothers weaving warm clothing through the winter. By blacksmiths shaping useful tools. By elders remembering where the boundary stones lie after snow has covered the fields. Civilizations endure because ordinary people quietly perform extraordinary amounts of work. As darkness finally settles over the valley, the stars emerge one by one above the fjord. The elderly farmer remains seated outside for a little longer, watching the familiar constellations he has known since childhood. Perhaps he remembers the first time his own grandfather pointed toward those same stars. Perhaps he wonders whether his grandchildren will someday do the same. Time moves gently here. Like the tide. Like the seasons. Like the slow growth of forests. Eventually, every generation steps aside so another may continue the work. You realize that your own year in Viking Scandinavia is nearing its end. You have seen the rhythm of ordinary life from spring to spring. Now it is time to step back and ask a larger question. Why did these people leave their rugged homeland at all? What drew them across unknown seas toward distant shores? Tomorrow, your journey will widen once more, as the quiet routines of the farm give way to the remarkable story of why the Vikings explored so much of the known world. The sun rises over the fjord just as it has every morning throughout the year. Golden light slowly spills across the calm water, touching the familiar mountains one by one. Thin wisps of mist drift between the pines before fading into the warming air. Sheep graze peacefully on the hillside, their bells sounding softly whenever they wander through the meadow. From the longhouse chimney, a thin column of wood smoke rises straight into the still sky. Everything feels wonderfully familiar. The farm is busy, but never hurried. Someone is repairing a fence damaged during the winter storms. Another family member gathers herbs that have begun growing along the edge of the forest. Children carry buckets of fresh water from the spring while laughing at something only they understand. Looking around, you might wonder why anyone would ever choose to leave. The valley provides food. The community provides friendship. The fjord offers fish. The forests offer timber. It seems enough. And for many people, it is. Most Norse men and women never become great explorers. They never sail to Iceland, cross the North Sea, or travel along the great rivers of Eastern Europe. They spend their lives within landscapes they know by heart, raising families and caring for the land that cared for them. Yet every year, some people climb aboard ships and disappear beyond the horizon. Not because they dislike home. Because home cannot always provide everything. You begin to understand this while helping harvest hay during the height of summer. The fields surrounding the farm are productive, but they are not endless. Steep mountains press closely against the valley. Rocky ground interrupts patches of fertile soil. Every generation divides land among children, and over time each family's fields become smaller. For younger sons and daughters especially, finding enough land to begin a household of their own can become increasingly difficult. The landscape is beautiful. It is also limited. Some people remain. Others look outward. Later that afternoon, you accompany one of the older farmers to a ridge overlooking the fjord. From there, the valley seems almost tiny. A handful of farms cling to the narrow strips of level ground between mountain and sea. Beyond them stretch endless forests, steep cliffs, and cold water. The elder gestures toward the horizon. "The sea is another road," he says quietly. It is a simple sentence. Yet it explains much of Viking history. To many modern people, the ocean appears to be a barrier. To experienced Norse sailors, it is a pathway. Traveling by land through dense forests and rugged mountains can take weeks. Following rivers and coastlines by ship often proves faster and easier. The sea connects. It does not merely separate. As the harvest continues over the following days, merchants arrive with news gathered from distant shores. One speaks of fertile land in Iceland where new farms continue to be established. Another has heard stories of rich trading towns far to the east along great river systems. Someone else mentions opportunities serving foreign rulers as hired warriors, earning silver before returning home. Every story carries possibility. Not certainty. Simply possibility. You realize that exploration often begins with conversation. A rumor shared beside a cooking fire. A tale told in a crowded marketplace. A sailor describing a harbor scene years earlier. Each story plants a small seed of curiosity. Some grow into voyages. Most do not. One evening, while mending fishing nets beside the shore, you ask a sailor what first inspired him to leave home. He thinks for a long moment before answering. "I wanted to see what was beyond the next headland." The response makes you smile. It is wonderfully human. Curiosity is rarely dramatic. It begins with simple questions. What lies over that mountain? Where does this river end? Who lives across the sea? Can my family build a better future somewhere else? The answers change history one voyage at a time. Not every journey succeeds. Some ships never return. Storms claim vessels before they reach land. Families establish farms only to discover harsh conditions they had never imagined. Others encounter unfamiliar diseases, difficult harvests, or conflict with people already living there. Exploration always carries uncertainty. The Norse understand this well. Their willingness to sail does not mean they ignore danger. It means they judge the possible rewards worth the risk. You remember the shipwrights carefully shaping oak planks months earlier. The traders weighing silver at the thing. The farmers storing hay before winter. Every lesson has pointed toward the same truth. Preparation comes before opportunity. Successful voyages depend upon strong ships, skilled crews, careful planning, and communities willing to support those who leave behind. No explorer truly travels alone. An entire society quietly stands behind each voyage. As autumn approaches once more, another ship prepares to depart from the fjord. Families gather along the shore to say farewell. Some travelers leave only for a season. Others may never return. Children wave enthusiastically until the vessel becomes a distant shape against the horizon. Parents remain watching long after the sail has disappeared from sight. Hope and uncertainty drift away together upon the same tide. Standing beside them, you notice there is little celebration. Departure is emotional. It means separation. The empty place at the family table. The extra work left behind. Months of wondering whether loved ones remain safe. History remembers the journeys. Families remember the waiting. As evening settles over the valley, you sit alone beside the water. Gentle waves lap against the smooth stones at your feet. A cool breeze carries the scent of salt and pine through the quiet air. Looking across the fjord, you reflect upon everything you have experienced during this remarkable year. The Vikings did not explore because they were endlessly restless. They explored because they were practical. Because some sought trade. Some searched for farmland. Some followed curiosity. Some sought wealth. Some fled conflict. Some simply accepted opportunities when they appeared. There was never a single reason. Only countless individual lives making difficult choices. Tomorrow, your journey will widen one final time. You have seen the farms, the longhouses, the markets, the ships, the beliefs, the winters, and the people who gave this civilization its strength. Now you will step back from your own experiences to understand why Viking society functioned so remarkably well, and why, despite its hardships, it endured across generations in one of the world's most demanding landscapes. You wake once again to the familiar sound of wind moving gently across the fjord, carrying with it the scent of pine, salt, and cold water. The longhouse is warm, the hearth still glowing faintly from the night before. Outside, the valley is unchanged in its shape, yet something in the way you see it has shifted completely. The same mountains stand watch. The same river cuts through the fields. The same wooden boats rest along the shore. But now you understand how many invisible systems hold all of it together. You step outside into the morning light. A neighbor greets you as they pass along the path with a bundle of firewood balanced across their shoulder. A few months ago, you might have simply noticed them in passing. Now you recognize something deeper in the exchange, a quiet web of relationships stretching across every household in the valley. No one here survives alone. A single farm cannot produce everything it needs. Grain may fail one year, but fish remain plentiful. Timber is abundant in one direction while fertile soil lies in another. Iron must be traded for wool. Salt must be carried from distant coasts. Every household depends on others in ways both obvious and invisible. This is why cooperation is not optional. It is survival. Later that morning, you are reminded of this while helping repair a section of fence shared between two neighboring farms. The work is simple, but the arrangement behind it is not. The land is not divided into rigid isolation. Boundaries exist, but they are maintained through agreement rather than constant enforcement. Everyone knows where the lines are. Everyone respects them because everyone depends on everyone else doing the same. If disputes arise, they are not solved by distant authorities. They are brought before the thing. Their reputation becomes as important as evidence. A person known for fairness carries weight even without wealth or power. A person known for dishonesty finds their words carry less meaning, no matter how strongly they speak. Trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild in a world where written contracts are rare and memory carries authority. You begin to see that Viking society is not chaotic or uncontrolled, as it is sometimes imagined. It is structured differently. Its structure is built on personal responsibility, on memory, on relationships that stretch across generations. In the afternoon, you walk toward the shoreline where a group of fishermen are repairing nets. Each knot is checked carefully. Each tier is mended with patience. The work is repetitive, but no one seems impatient. They understand that a single weak strand can cause a net to fail during a critical catch. And failure in one season affects the entire community through the winter that follows. As you watch, one of the fishermen explains something without looking up from his work. If my net breaks, I do not eat. If I do not eat, my neighbor helps me. Next season, I help them. The statement is simple, but it reveals the quiet logic of the society. Reciprocity is not charity. It is expectation. It is memory extended into the future. That evening, you are invited to a gathering inside a neighboring longhouse. The fire burns brightly at the center of the room, casting shifting shadows across carved wooden beams blackened by years of smoke. People sit close together, not only for warmth, but because space itself is limited and shared. A traveler speaks about a journey to the east. Another describes trade in distant southern ports. An elder recalls winters when food stores were nearly exhausted but the community endured by sharing what little remained. Every story reinforces the same idea in different forms. Survival depends on connection, not isolation, not individual strength alone. As the fire burns lower, the conversation turns briefly to leadership. In this world, there is no single ruler controlling every village. Instead, leadership is distributed. Chieftains gain influence through reputation, generosity, and the ability to support followers. Wealth is not only measured in silver, but in loyalty earned through consistent action. A leader who cannot provide protection, fairness, or hospitality will not retain support for long. Power must be maintained continuously. It is never absolute. You realize that this creates a different kind of stability. Less rigid than empires built on centralized control, but flexible enough to survive in a land of scattered farms, unpredictable weather, and long distances. The system bends rather than breaks. Over time, you begin to understand how deeply interwoven everything is. Farming connects to trade. Trade connects to exploration. Exploration connects to storytelling. Storytelling connects to law. Law connects to trust. And trust connects back to farming again. Each part depends on the others. Remove one, and the rest weaken. As you step outside after the gathering, the night is clear. Stars scatter across the sky in quiet abundance. The fjord reflects their light like a second heavens beneath your feet. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once before falling silent again. Life continues. Unremarkable. Steady. Sustained by countless invisible agreements between people who may not always agree, but must always cooperate. You begin to understand that Viking society worked not because it was simple, but because it was balanced. Harsh environment. Limited resources. Strong necessity for cooperation. And a shared understanding that survival required participation from everyone. There is no final moment of triumph in this realization. Only clarity. Tomorrow, you will step beyond explanation itself. You will return to the central question that has lingered beneath every season you have lived through here. Not how the Vikings lived, but why you, placed within their world, would struggle to survive it at all. The morning feels quieter than it should. Not because anything is missing from the valley, but because something in your awareness has changed. The longhouse still breathes with smoke and warmth. The fjord still reflects the slow movement of clouds. The sheep still drift across the hills like pale shapes against green summer grass. Yet you now see everything with sharper awareness. Not only what is happening, but what it costs. You step outside and begin the day's work as always. Fetching water from the spring. Carrying firewood. checking the condition of stored grain, repairing a section of rope that has begun to fray. Each task is simple on its own, but together they form a pattern you have come to understand deeply over this year. Nothing maintains itself. Everything requires attention. Everything requires memory. Everything requires effort repeated across seasons. A single missed task does not create immediate disaster, but small neglect accumulates. A roof not repaired in summer leaks in winter. A tool not sharpened slows the harvest. A net not mended reduces food in the cold months ahead. Survival here is not dramatic. It is continuous. Later in the morning, you walk with a group toward the fields. The soil is soft beneath your boots, dark from recent rain. Birds follow behind the plow, searching for insects exposed by the turning earth. At first, the work seems familiar now. Your hands move without hesitation. Your body has learned the rhythm of labor shaped by the land. But then you notice something else. There is no pause built into this system. No guaranteed rest between seasons. Even moments of calm are preparation for the next demand. When summer arrives, it is not leisure. It is labor concentrated. When winter arrives, it is not rest. It is endurance. You begin to understand that adaptation here is not about strength alone. People do adapt, but it is not immediate. It requires years of learning embedded in daily life from childhood onward. It requires growing into a system rather than entering it fully formed. And even then, survival is never guaranteed. A person raised here learns to read storms before they arrive, to preserve food without waste, to understand social obligations that extend far beyond immediate family, to recognize when silence is appropriate and when speech matters. These skills are not optional. They are foundational. As night falls, you walk alone toward the shoreline one last time. The fjord is calm again. The stars begin appearing one by one, reflected in the still water below. You imagine arriving here with no knowledge, no seasonal memory, no understanding of tools, weather, or community expectations, no inherited skills, no years of practice labor. Only modern assumptions about convenience, separation, and immediate access to resources. The contrast becomes clear without needing to exaggerate it. It is not that survival would be impossible in a single moment. It is that life would quickly overwhelm without the accumulated knowledge built over a lifetime. Not because the environment is hostile, but because it is detailed, demanding, precise, and deeply interconnected. You finally understand the quiet truth that has been unfolding throughout every season you have lived here. People do not fail in Viking Scandinavia because they are weak. They fail because survival requires being shaped by the land long before adulthood begins. The wind moves across the fjord, gentle and steady. Somewhere behind you, a door closes softly in the longhouse. Life continues, as it always has. Tomorrow, there will be no final lesson. Only the closing reflection of everything you have lived through. And the simple realization that understanding this world is not the same as being able to live inside it. Not because you lack intelligence. Not because you lack strength. But because survival here is built on knowledge that is accumulated slowly, over a lifetime, inside a specific landscape. You cannot learn it all at once. You cannot import it. You must grow into it. You continue toward the shoreline. The fjord is calm, stretching outward like polished stone. A fishing boat moves slowly in the distance, its rhythm steady and practiced. The same waters that feed this village also connect it to distant places you have only seen briefly, markets, ports, unfamiliar coasts. Everything is connected. Yet nothing is guaranteed. That is the second reason you would not survive. Because certainty does not exist here in the way it is often assumed to exist elsewhere. There are no fixed safety nets beyond what the community provides collectively. No stored abundance that lasts indefinitely. No instant replacement for lost harvests or broken tools. A single poor season can reshape an entire year. A harsh winter can erase careful planning. A storm can undo weeks of labor in hours. Even so, life continues. Not because it is easy, but because it is shared. You think back to the thing assembly, to the shipbuilders, to the traders, to the long winter nights beside the fire. Every moment you have lived here has pointed toward the same truth. Survival is not individual achievement. It is collective maintenance. A network of obligations, trust, memory, and labor that spans families and generations. That is the third reason you would not survive. Because belonging is not optional. It is essential. To live here is to be known. To be known is to be accountable. And to be accountable is to participate fully in the expectations of others, work, fairness, contribution, and reputation maintained over time. There is no hiding from this system. Not because it is oppressive, but because it is small enough that everyone's actions matter. As the sun begins its slow descent toward the western hills, you return once more to the longhouse. Inside, the hearth burns steadily. Someone is preparing food. Someone is repairing clothing. Someone is telling a story that has likely been told hundreds of times before. Life continues without pause. You sit near the fire and listen. Not as an outsider anymore. But not fully as a lifelong member either. Something in between. And in that space, the final understanding settles quietly. You would not survive here easily. Not because the world is cruel, but because it is precise, demanding, interdependent, and shaped by knowledge that cannot be rushed. But this is only half the truth. Because surviving was never the only measure of life here. Living was. People did not endure simply to endure. They built families, shared meals, laughed during festivals, told stories beside the fire, watched children grow, bury their dead with care and memory, found meaning in work that repeated every year but never felt empty. The wind moves gently across the fjord one last time as daylight fades. The water reflects the sky in soft, fading gold. Somewhere in the distance, a raven crosses the horizon. And the world continues, quiet, vast, and unconcerned with who is watching it. Your year here ends not with departure, but with understanding. You would not survive a year in Viking Scandinavia. And that is okay. Because the point was never to survive it perfectly. The point was to see how a world like this actually lived. And to understand, finally, that it was built not on legend or violence alone, but on ordinary people, repeating ordinary actions, in an extraordinary balance with the land and the sea. There is a strange silence that follows a long journey when it finally comes to an end. Not silence in the world itself. The fjord still moves with the tide. The wind still passes through the birch trees. Life in Viking Scandinavia continues exactly as it did before you arrived. The silence is within you. You stand once more on the familiar ground beside the longhouse, yet the feeling is no longer the same as when you first arrived. The place has not changed. But your understanding of it has. A year ago, you might have seen a collection of simple scenes. A farm. A ship. A winter landscape. A market. A group of people living close to the land. Now you see something else entirely. You see systems layered over systems. You see how winter is not a season of suffering alone, but a planned structure of survival supported by summer labor. You see how trade is not occasional exchange, but a lifeline connecting distant worlds. You see how law is not distant authority, but reputation maintained through memory and community. You see how belief, work, family, and survival are not separate parts of life, but the same thing expressed in different forms. A man walks past carrying a bundle of firewood, nodding briefly as he greets someone across the yard. It is such a small moment that it almost disappears. And yet, it contains everything you have learned. Someone gathered that wood. Someone planned where it would be stored. Someone will burn it to keep a family warm. Someone will cook food with that heat. Someone will sit beside that fire and tell stories that preserve memory through winter darkness. Nothing stands alone. Everything continues something else. The village does not feel like a setting anymore. It feels like a living pattern. A rhythm that existed long before you arrived and will continue long after you are gone. You begin walking toward the edge of the fjord. The water is calm, reflecting the sky in long, shifting bands of light. A small boat drifts in the distance, barely moving, as if resting between journeys. For a moment, you imagine what it would be like to stay. Not as a visitor. Not as an observer. But as someone born into this rhythm. To learn the seasons before you can remember anything else. To understand tools not as objects, but as extensions of daily life. To grow up knowing exactly when to act and when to wait, without needing to be taught later in life. That kind of knowledge cannot be quickly acquired. It is inherited through time. Through repetition. Through living the same year many times in different generations. You realize that what seemed difficult during your experience was not only physical hardship. It was the absence of that lifetime of preparation. The absence of memory that begins in childhood. The absence of instinct shaped by landscape. The absence of belonging that comes from never having to learn where you fit. And yet, despite all of that, what remains most vivid in your mind is not struggle. It is continuity. The steady fire in the longhouse during winter nights. The sound of oars in early morning mist. The patience of farmers waiting for harvest. The quiet conversations shared between neighbors who depend on one another more than they ever need to say aloud. This is what lingers. Not the difficulty, but the coherence. The way everything fits together when seen from within. The sun lowers toward the mountains once more.